You had 100 reasons not to shine when you were younger. And as a kid growing up with abuse or neglect, you may not have had the support or even the permission to be extraordinary, to be gifted, to be your unique and quirky self. But to fully become yourself now, you can't let that traumatic past keep pressing you down so that you can conform and stay invisible and play small. Right now is the time when you get to decide whether you will rise up on the path of real healing and become your full and real self, or whether you're going to take that so-called easy road, which in the short run is easier. It doesn't take a lot of courage or effort, but it does require that you continue your self-suppression and tolerate the empty and depressed feeling that playing small always demands. That's the price you pay. And I'm here to tell you from my own experience, recovering from abuse and neglect in childhood, that healing is the easy road. It sounds scary and hard, but the hardest road of all is when you don't heal your past, when you don't find a way of calming those intense triggers, and you have to keep your life very tightly controlled and isolated and tiptoeing around your own reactions. Because why? Because you think that if you don't control it, life is going to break you. And I want to show you how you cannot break, how you can open up a little at a time to experiences like friendship and romantic relationships and your work life and trying new things that used to be too triggering for you. And I want to give you the real tools to make that possible for yourself, to get out of small and get into the big, beautiful life you really want. Okay? So to stop instinctively protecting yourself, let's look at what's really going on when you play small. The first thing is, if you're like just about everybody with complex PTSD, people are triggering. And when I say triggering, I'm not just talking about a cultural phenomenon. I'm talking about a physiological reaction that happens with PTSD when a certain stimulus happens. It could be something like people yelling at you, something that was terribly unfair, being in danger, suddenly a car almost runs into you, things like that. There could be positive triggers too, like asking somebody out on a date or winning a prize. Things like that can set off a brain dysregulation that actually makes it difficult for you to function normally. So sometimes with people can be so triggering, just connecting with them, that you end up keeping them at arm's length or cutting them off and removing yourself from opportunities with people just because you're afraid of how you're going to feel when you put yourself out there a little bit. That feeling that rises up that you don't trust yourself to handle when you're triggered. There's a little sequence that happens in your body, in your emotions when you're triggered. You might not even be aware that it's there, or you thought it was just you, that you're just overreacting. Maybe you tell yourself you're childish and you should get over it, and you've probably been told that by other people, but when you say it to yourself, that's a self-attack that can really make the effect of the trigger worse, just so you remember that. Now let's say you're hanging out at work and somebody says something, they praise somebody else where you should have gotten half the credit. That happens. That's a common trigger, getting overlooked. So let's just take the work example. A trigger comes up, adrenaline starts flowing. You can feel it like running down your arms. Does that ever happen to you? It's almost like you can feel it moving and you're, oh no, here it goes again. Your brain starts to dysregulate in the pattern that is normal and common for people who went through abuse and neglect when they were kids. Reasoning goes down, emotions go up. Next thing you know, an emotional statement just comes flying out of your mouth. You're completely unregulated for a moment. And whatever you blurted out causes damage to your reputation, to other people's feelings. Now, this used to happen to me, and I would be totally baffled in the moment why it was happening. I didn't know what was causing it. I thought it was just me. And I couldn't understand, why would I do something so self-sabotaging? And later I learned, but at the time it feels necessary to just say this thing. It's just pressing. It feels like it must be said, and then it comes out just too harshly. And you can see people flinch when you say it. Has that ever happened to you? And then how do you feel? Shame, remorse, hiding, fear. And there were times when I would say things, and the way I sounded when I said them just made me afraid. It made me afraid to speak up. And I learned to keep my mouth shut. I'd make small talk. When I had a strong opinion or disagreed or needed to say something to defend myself or set a boundary, I just wouldn't. And I kept my ideas to myself. I'd let things that were unfair or untrue just go and not say anything. And I didn't do things like ask for a raise or make a case to my boss to let me try new things that I wanted to learn. And all of this was because I was in the habit of fearing how intense I would get when I expressed myself, especially when the stakes were high or when there was some hurt feelings like buried in there in the reason that I was speaking up. And I now know that this silence in crucial moments is normal for people with CPTSD. If you went through abuse and neglect as a kid, it's a normal reaction when you're stressed to get a little dysregulated when you speak up courageously. And if it comes out with a bit of an edge, what you can do is learn to stay more regulated in those situations. Things come out better when you're regulated. You'll have awkward moments in life. You'll have awkward moments sometimes. And sometimes you might have to apologize for your tone of voice. But all of that is a tiny price to pay when you compare it to avoiding the problem altogether by withdrawing from your life, not going for anything, saying nothing. So that's a form of playing small. A second way you might be playing small is staying stuck in blame. And first, I just want to say the people who abused you are in fact to blame for what they did to you. It's not your fault, and it's good you're healing from any idea that you may have internalized that you deserved that. The people who hurt you, they are to blame for hurting you. There's just no question there. But right now, they can't do anything about the past. And it's rare that abusers even try. But remember, even if they admitted everything and did everything they couldn't do anything about the past. The damage has been done, and your brain has sustained that injury of abuse and neglect already. And so now it's you who needs to start healing that. Now it's you who's been suffering from the dysregulated nervous system for a lot of your life, and it's been affecting your behavior and your choices. So now it's you who can heal that and start to change how this plays out. When you believe that the problem that needs solving is in the past, you give away all your power to change the problem. And the people who hurt you, they can't change the past. You can't change the past. And that's why I encourage you to take your focus off the people who hurt you, off the past, even though they were to blame, even though that really happened, and step away from the blame game. Not because they didn't hurt you, but because you need to get that power back into yourself so you can start using all your energy for changing your life right now, for noticing where CPTSD is affecting you and figuring out a strategy for how you can work around it and still succeed at the things you're trying to do. All right. A third thing that might be a factor in you playing small is that you've grown too foggy mentally and cognitively to take action on things, even when you know the right thing to do. This is also common for people who went through abuse and neglect as kids. That brain fog is something that people so often blame themselves for. You might be attacking yourself with the idea that you're stupid, you're lazy, you can't pay attention, and all of that might not be true, even if you were diagnosed with some problem in those areas. Some clinical experts I trust say that sometimes the ADHD diagnosis, for example, is a misdiagnosis of what's really a symptom of CPTSD. Not always, but that's worth noting. You can ask a professional about that if you think it might apply to you. So when you're making a plan to improve your life, but then when you take action, that brain fog comes and settles down on you, it can feel like you're walking through honey or sand or mud, like something thick and awful that slows you down and wears you out. When you're feeling stuck like that, it can be really hard to see clearly and move forward. And sometimes just following through on a series of items on a list, it'll just feel like too much. And then you get one thing done and then whoop, off into the fog again. We all know, you know what that's like, right? It's a CPTSD thing. Now, in fact, it's a dysregulation thing. And if you think you might be struggling with dysregulation, you can take my quiz that's on the free tools page of my website. That free tools page is linked right near the top of the description section under all my videos. But luckily, there are a lot of workarounds that you can use to start improving your mental acuity. Now, one of them has to do with diet. And there are many ways that you can eat in a healthy way, but it usually involves eating lightly and not eating too much sugar and not eating too much high fast carbohydrate foods. You should try it, see if it makes a difference for you. People love to talk about what to eat, and they love to debate the best way. And so whatever way is best for you, try this. Less sugar, less fast carbs. Cut it out for a couple days and see what happens to your ability to pay attention. There are other things you can do too. I teach a technique for writing fears and resentments followed by meditation. And that is the most powerful thing that I've done to get my focus and sense of calm inside back, just bringing it back, coming back to earth. Before I had this technique, I remember telling people, I used to be really smart. And I had it when I was younger. I was really good at crossword puzzles. I got good grades in school. But the worse my CPTSD symptoms got, the more I felt like my intelligence was just like wearing down. And I asked the doctor if I could get checked for dementia once. This was when I was like 30. I'd lost my ability to do math in my head or to write complicated ideas in a way that made sense to whoever was reading my work. I was hopeless at keeping track of time or remembering what was on my calendar. And that's all really normal when your CPTSD symptoms are getting worse. But what happened is, when I got my brain back and I learned to re-regulate my brain and my emotions and my nervous system by using these techniques that I teach, it's called the daily practice, by the way. These are the twin techniques of writing and meditation. I'm always talking about them. They're always linked below the videos. But when I started using that technique within about 2 weeks, it was like I felt like I had recovered about 30 IQ points. And it was this tremendous boost in my mental ability back to how I used to be. And every day, it's my opportunity to keep honing that level of calm and alert awareness. It's in that state that I have access to my natural intelligence. I was born with it, and you were born with it too. And when your natural intelligence and awareness is suppressed, it is one of the worst consequences that childhood trauma brings on people and makes it necessary for them to play small. You can't focus, you can't think, you can't access your intelligence. You lose your confidence in that. But you can't suppress yourself forever just in case you'll be caught out for being out of it or too emotional or too angry. You need that calm awareness. You need your intelligence back. It doesn't matter if you're in your 50s or your 60s or your 70s, 80s, 90s. There's more mental acuity available to you by learning to re-regulate from a triggered state of dysregulation to a regulated state. And this is something you can learn. Finally, another reason you might be playing small is because you fear other people's disapproval. When you stop playing small, it sometimes means expressing yourself, even when it might mean expressing ideas that not everybody agrees with. Now, that was a process I had to go through in order to start Crappy Childhood Fairy back in the day, not so many years ago, just a few. And I was afraid people would say I had no right to tell other people what I was discovering about what worked and what didn't for trauma. And they do say that sometimes, they say I have no right. Well, I don't feel limited by that anymore. When I first started out, I did feel limited. I tried to be safe. I wrote a very safe and very boring blog that nobody could object to, and nobody did, mostly because nobody bothered to read it. And gradually I learned that the only thing that really engaged people or made a difference in their lives is if I was real about what it was like to have what I have, what we have. I had no idea people would have such a strong reaction to it. I told the truth. I started talking about what it was like to be me, how I felt when I was trying to talk about problems to a therapist, and what it was like when I couldn't do it, and what it was like when I had a breakthrough, what caused that to happen, what did I have to stop doing. I told the truth about my experience, which was messy and a little controversial, and I was always worried about getting canceled. But the blog led to the videos, and the videos ended up finding you, and here we are. And I stopped playing small. I still get criticism, and I get a little bit of hate mail now and then, but I don't let it stop me. The work I share here has a life of its own, and it wants to come out, and it carries me forward. When I first started out, I kind of had to push it. I had to try really hard, but Now I find it like it's just kind of like a natural thing that I create every week, and it feels a little bit like getting carried along in a river. Actually, making videos is hard. Sometimes I want to resist it, but overall, like what I'm doing here in this work, I just feel like I'm being carried. And I was made for this river, and the river was made for me. And I wake up each morning, I'm just excited to get back in that river and keep going. When you play small, you don't say anything that offends people. And when you begin to show up as your real self, becoming open about who you are and telling the truth about what you know and what you believe, you take a risk. You take a risk. What helps make that an okay risk to take is when you also cultivate a loving heart, a commitment to be kind and thoughtful about when and how you express yourself, and respect for other people and their right to disagree with you. Like when those two things come up together, you're outspoken, but you're also kind and respectful, you can get away with a lot. And growing a sensitivity to others' feelings and their dignity will gain you a lot of leeway to say how you feel. Nobody likes a bully. Nobody likes a blowhard who just spouts opinions but doesn't know what they're talking about and doesn't listen. You being kind and thoughtful and real is a powerful combination for opening other people's hearts and minds. And this is where good things tend to start cropping up in your life. If you're in an environment where nobody speaks up, your self-expression, it's going to attract attention. So get ready. There are risks, but it's not as big a risk as shutting yourself down and ceasing to express who you are. When you do express yourself, you might even make it safe for other people to express themselves. That's a good side of it. Everyone benefits when groups can trust and remain open in a robust conversation about a mixture of points of view. That's a very powerful and good phenomenon, and that is how it's meant to be. When you take your place among the people working to make the world better and kinder and more supportive for those who are still struggling, especially, you will begin to feel the unmistakable stir of happiness. That's where it comes from. Not speaking up keeps you bottled up in yourself, and this may block out trauma, but it blocks out everything good too. Being yourself makes it possible to turn your focus outward, to feel connection to other people, to stop focusing so much on whether you feel bad or good or hot or cold, and instead to have that purpose. Your real self might come running out like a little colt that hasn't found its legs yet, or it might come out like a little kid who gets really excited and then cries. It's a growth process, and when you first begin to express yourself, let it be clumsy. Your development may have been delayed in some areas, but it's catching up now. And so yes, go ahead and get started. Remember to be kind. Practice will make it all smoother. People may start relying on you, and this can be scary for a person with CPTSD. Maybe you're a people pleaser, or maybe too much responsibility was part of what hurt you when you were a kid, and you ended up with a big wall around saying yes to responsibility. And that may be a great coping strategy for a 12-year-old, but it's not for a 30 or 40 or 50-year-old. It's time to say yes to your life with boundaries, and to show up and start using your gifts. And that feeling that life is passing you by, that feeling of emptiness, that's what it feels like when there's been too much avoidance and too much self-protection and not enough standing up to bring your gifts into the world where they're desperately needed. If you're going to heal from the trauma of the past, you're going to need to get your power back. And what I mean by that is the life force that is generally drained and suppressed by trauma that gives you energy and focus each day to get up and take care of yourself. Now, when I say power, I don't necessarily mean power over other people. I want to talk about power as the inner resource inside where you know your next right action and you have the strength and confidence to actually take that action. Because it takes power to get up in the morning. It takes power to take a shower, to brush your teeth, to get to work on time, right? It takes power to get a job, and it takes power to leave a job that no longer works for you. It takes power to learn something new, right? To create something, to develop yourself, to be ready for a new job maybe. And it takes power to hold your ground and stay regulated around difficult people. So this is really what empowerment is. It's not something other people give you, like, I empowered these people. It's not really something that can be given. It's something that rises up within yourself through consistent, positive actions in the atmosphere of your basic good self. But power is also something that you can make stronger by steering clear of things that drain your power. So the trouble with CPTSD is it's really common for people to lose their power. And a lot of trauma-driven behaviors do that. They feel like a great idea, but they drain you in the end. So let's talk about CPTSD behaviors that take away your power. I'll tell you a bunch of them, and then we'll go back through and I'll tell you how you get back your power from each of those tendencies that people with CPTSD have. You'll have some of these, not all of them. So let's talk about the CPTSD behaviors that take away your power. And I'll tell you a whole list of possibilities, and you can see if any of them ring true for you. But after I go through them, I'll go back and I'll talk about how to take your power back if that's your tendency, okay? So number one, the way people with trauma sometimes lose their power is believing that someone is coming to save you. And you know, this doesn't just come from Disney movies. It's just coded in there. It is an old childhood memory. And if you were not protected and people did not come to your aid when you needed it when you were a kid, you may have kind of gotten stuck with your hope just kind of flying out of you all the time. You know, sooner or later, somebody's going to show me the boundaries of what's happening here. They're going to tell me how you're supposed to navigate this. And one of the hardest things about growing up and then as you get older, it's this hard realization that comes when you grow up, sometimes gradually, sometimes it takes a long time, that nobody's coming, that sometimes people can help you when you need help, but mainly evolving your life and becoming who you really are is something you're going to do. All right, number two, this is a tendency that can drain your power, is believing that someone who hasn't apologized to you must apologize, and they got to do it right, or you're never going to heal. That's a really self-destructive belief, and it drains your power. It's basically taking all your power and putting it in the hands of somebody else, you know, with this idea like, and I totally believe you that they probably owe you an apology, but it doesn't have to mean that you don't heal. And to believe that anything can stop you from healing is to give away your power. Your power depends on you, you know, just having a basic mindset of like, anything is possible. I know healing is possible. I'm going to get to work on it. I'm going to do the best I can. And if things don't work, I'll change course a little bit and I'll keep finding what does work. That is a positive attitude. That's, you know, basically all any of us has. All right, number three, for things that drain your power, and it's trying to get approval from people who are mean to you or don't care about you. And I know you have people like this in your life. We all do. If you have CPTSD, it probably starts with parents, there's relatives, there's, you know, people you knew all your life. There's this weird way that when you're not treated like you're a real person, like a real child who has real needs when you're a kid, like the whole world conspires to treat you like that sometimes. Not the whole world, but you're going to keep finding a pattern with that. But if you dance around thinking that it's getting the approval that's going to solve the problem, and you're abandoning yourself, betraying yourself, losing yourself, trying to get somebody to like you, it drains your power. It drains your power. At a certain point, you need to approve of yourself. And to do that is sometimes going to be a project, because to approve of ourselves for real means you do things that you feel good about. You've cleaned up messes that you don't feel good about. So we'll talk about that when we come back through. All right. Number four, the thing that drains your power is avoiding conflict. Now, I know I sometimes advise people, avoid conflict. Don't go to a family holiday and get into it with people about politics or what happened in the past. Like, that will ruin your day and everybody who's there, including the innocent parties who were just hoping to have a holiday dinner with everybody. There's kids in extended families who are in the same position you were in as a kid, and if you can remember what it feels like when people are fighting. So there are so many good reasons to avoid conflict, but at a certain point, you need to stand up and actually have the conflict and speak up for yourself, or it begins to drain your power. All right, number five, The opposite of avoiding conflict is fighting everyone, just fighting everyone about everything. And I don't know, I've been that person before, and it's exhausting. It feels like a crusade. It feels like it's just happening to you, and you have no choice. But you do have a choice about who you fight with. And if you're fighting with everyone, you're probably going to drain all your power before you actually resolve anything. I totally understand the spirit of fighting everyone. It's like standing up for yourself, standing up for what's true, not allowing abuse. And yes, you don't want to do those things. But if it's just like across the board, what ends up happening is you lose so much power, you can't take sane action. You can't see what's really happening. So you neither want to avoid conflict or fight everyone. There's this middle ground. Number 6 is using intoxicating drugs to cope with dysregulation. Now, those might be prescribed. We might be talking about alcohol, which is, it's not illegal. It's just intoxicating. And so are street drugs, obviously. But a lot of people will say, I'm self-medicating, with alcohol or weed or what have you. And self-medicating, I just think that's a nice way of saying using. It's just everybody's self-medicating when they use drugs and alcohol. When there's not like an underlying addiction, it's, we call it recreational, but it's always like on a continuum, right? From the first part of the continuing, it's like it starts fun and then it turns into, self-medication and trying to deal with feelings. So I just bring this up so that you can ask yourself, are you using the term self-medication, or are you using drugs out of some belief? I hear this a lot. People are like, yeah, they smoke weed every day, quite a lot, saying it helps with regulation. And I would just say, do whatever you have to do to keep yourself alive. But in the long run, if you're going to learn to re-regulate, it's not going to work with intoxicants. That's just not generally the pattern for people. The ideal state for you is to be able to go, oh, I'm getting dysregulated, and then to have tools to be able to pull it back in, to be able to pull that back in. If you have a tendency to get neurologically dysregulated, you feel overwhelmed, discombobulated, clumsy, can't get your words out, spacing out, you might be having dysregulation from complex PTSD. It's really normal for people who had a traumatic childhood. And I teach people how to overcome that. I'll put a link up above here where you can download. I have a download called Signs of Dysregulation and Emergency Measures to Re-Regulate. And you can get that by clicking that. But stay with me here. If you're using drugs to re-regulate, it's a temporary fix. It's probably not re-regulating you that well. And when you do learn to re-regulate, even a little bit, even if you haven't mastered it every day, all day, nobody has, right? Everybody gets dysregulated sometimes. But with CPTSD, we just want to be better at re-regulating. We want to notice it's happening. We want to get re-regulated faster. The 7th thing that can drain your power from complex PTSD is putting yourself down, where you are having this negative self-talk, that inner critic going, oh, I'm such an idiot, oh, I know this is, or you're talking to people and you're like, excuse me, I know this is stupid, but can I ask a question? You're putting yourself down. And it's a natural instinct that comes with the fawning. There's 4 trauma reactions: fight, flight, freeze, fawn. And fawning is when you're like, excuse me, I'm sorry. And putting oneself down is sort of the equivalent of when a dog who's like nervous and jittery, and you go to pet them and they go, ooh, and they roll over on their back. You don't want to be like that. You want to stay in your strength. You want to stay in your power. All right, number 8 is overspending, credit cards, going into debt. That is a way that you lose your power. A person who has a lot of debt has very few choices. Like, you have to stay in some job that you have, because to spend 2 months looking for a different one would throw you so far off financially that you can't even do it. So overspending and debting are 2 things that take the power away, that you could really do so much more with that power for healing. All right. 9, underspending. Yes, the opposite is not good either. You drain your power. And I always say, if you want to know if you're underspending, go look in your underwear drawer. Are they decent? Would you be okay if somebody had to go in your room and pack for you? Does your underwear drawer reflect your basic socioeconomic level? Or is everything shabby and yucky and assuming no one's ever going to see it? you might be underspending. Sometimes taking care of yourself means having appropriate things, not lavish things, but appropriate. All right, number 11 is avoiding your own intellectual growth, avoiding learning. Learning is so important, and you're going to need to learn to heal. So when you're avoiding that, when you're, doing waste of time things like, drinking, watching TV. I love TV. I love TV. There's a place for it. But when you're doing that instead of doing the learning that would help you heal, it's a problem. Number 12, staying friends with people who drain your energy, who diminish you, who put you down, who take a lot from you but don't give back. This is so common for us, but it drains your power, and it starts to affect how you see yourself, who you see yourself as being, what you think is possible for you. All right, number 13, getting into romantic relationships with people who cannot or will not go the distance with you. So if you're taking all your love and all that sort of powerful, potent life force of wanting to be in a relationship, very precious energy that you have, right? Possibly even having children. This is like a very important power and energy that you have. And if you're just taking it and just, giving it to somebody who doesn't care about you, you'll know if you're doing it, right? But if you're doing that, your power is just draining away, and you don't even have that to attract someone appropriate or to give to somebody who happens to show up. You won't even recognize good people who show up when you're completely drained by, obsessing on someone unavailable or staying in a relationship that's not good for you. All right, number 14 is neglecting yourself. If you're not taking care of your health, if you're not taking care of your hygiene, this is really common, right? Your appearance, like, is your hair brushed in the back? In the back. And after the, I'm not talking about pandemic times here. And I saw this once on New Girl where she goes, I'm going to shave my legs, even on the back. Back of the legs too. And I laughed so hard because that was like, yeah, that's a level of self-care that I had to graduate to. And so, we don't just do this for appearances of having hygiene, but we actually take care of ourselves. So we'll talk about that in a minute. All right, number 15, draining your power, is doing too much, overfunctioning. This is where you just feel like, I do everything for everybody. You go to potlucks with way more than other people bring to the potluck. You keep your life incredibly busy. You're pursuing multiple degrees and jobs all at the same time. And you know the signs because you're very stressed out and exhausted all the time. I think doing things and accomplishment and taking action is super wonderful, but there is a line. There's a line where it begins to drain your power. All right, 16, doing too little, getting paralyzed from taking action, avoiding action altogether, just getting into deep procrastination. Oh, it feels so bad to do that. Drains your power. 17 is blaming other people for your problems. And you undoubtedly have problems that are caused by other people. But there can be this way where that becomes a deep rumination. It's a rumination that gets into your bones and you think about it all the time. And you're like, if only this thing hadn't happened in 1981, everything would be different for me. And what that puts you into is somewhere other than right here looking at your problems and what can be done about them. Losing power. Number 18 is cutting people out of your life instead of healing relationships when healing is possible and desirable. So we've all encountered people who sort of cut and run when the going feels a little bit tense. They are fleers. They are avoidant. And that might be you too. A lot of us kind of swing both ways on that. Like if somebody's fleeing from you, maybe you cling. If they're smothering you, you flee. It's all really common with CPTSD. But our power builds up when we can stay and deepen relationships and strengthen them. So if you're sabotaging all of that, I have no doubt you're losing opportunities in personal power. Okay, my last two have to do with not dealing with the problems in your life. And one way to do that is to stay too busy, running around all the time, overfilling your calendar. Oh, I'm so stressed, I'm so busy. The other way you can do that is by being too involved, too consumed with other people's problems, such as if you're in a relationship with somebody who has an addiction or who's an alcoholic, or who's doing something terrible with the money, and you're just constantly consumed in this, and you're tired and drained and walking around with circles under your eyes because of what you've been going through at home, consumed with somebody else's problem. There is a way to take your power back from that. So let's talk about that. Let's go back through the list that I just gave you and talk about how you can retrieve your power and build it up instead as you heal your trauma. With the belief that someone is going to come and save you, I want you to just tell yourself right now, that is a beautiful fantasy, and I am hereby going to step up and save myself. It's the best thing. So one part of my life where I've had to do this is, Crappy Childhood Fairy. It's a company, and it's a company I love running, but I don't know if I do it the best way all the time. And I used to have this fantasy that if I could just find the right consultant, they would come in and go, I see exactly what you're doing right. I see exactly what you're doing wrong. Do this, change that. And everything would get easy and better. And it never worked. And I tried and tried with some different things and different functions. And what I had to learn is it's actually going to have to be me. Like, it's my company. And if something is wrong, I'm going to need to do the research to understand why, and I'm going to have to come up with the solution to fix it. And I can hire a team and I can have people help me, but it's always going to be that the buck stops with me. I'm going to have to see it. I'm the person who cares the most about it. And so it is with our lives. So if you find yourself thinking, if I could just find the right person, if I just had, $50,000 more, all my problems would be solved. No, probably some very specific problems would be solved, to do with money or to do with now you're with somebody and when you go to the wedding, you have a date, but it does not solve all your problems. And in the end, it's you who's always going to be facing, get this, a never-ending fountain of problems. Like, we're human. Problems come at us, problems bubble up from within. And so the strongest, safest route you can take is just to be very, ride the surfboard of life and just know you're going to have to spot your own problems. You're going to have to be responsive to them and try to embrace that. It's actually the great adventure of life is what it is. With CPTSD, it can feel like, oh, I'm broken, there's no point, or this is too overwhelming. But that's a terrible attitude. Problems will pile up if you can't come and save yourself. And save yourself, it's sort of an exaggerated term. Every once in a while, actually, you do need to save yourself out of a dangerous situation. But saving yourself from a life of mediocrity, a life of quiet desperation, a life of isolation to cope with your triggers, that's worth saving yourself. And you can do that. You can do that, and it's going to come from you. The second thing is, instead of believing that someone has to apologize for you to heal, just accept that they are never going to apologize. If they do, it'll be this incredible surprise, but you'll find out then it doesn't fix you. You don't need it to heal. And the thing is, most people never apologize, or if they do, it's a flimsy apology. It doesn't really speak to the thing that hurt you. So your post-traumatic growth has to do with how you sort of take that thing that happened to you and you're able to, compartmentalize it a little bit. Be like, yes, this happened, but it's not my whole identity. I'm not sitting there like with a festering wound that only some other person, like the person who hurt you. Oh my gosh, you can't even, if they couldn't be kind to you in the first place, are they really going to help you recover? Are they really going to say the words that you need? I have such great news. You don't need them. And sometimes when you can sort of relax that demand on people or that expectation, it does create a little bit more gentleness and space where maybe they would give it a try sometime. But I'm telling you, you probably won't be satisfied because people who hurt others, it takes a lot of denial to live with oneself. That's what I'm just saying. Occasionally people do the work where they really get it and they can say they're sorry and they've been thinking about how that must have affected you and how lovely that they do that. And I think there's a really great connection that can grow with people as a result of that. And it might prompt you to sort of go, oh yeah, that really wasn't my fault. But often it doesn't bring the perfect island landing of perfect ease that we were hoping for. That comes from the healing that you can do whether anybody else takes responsibility for their actions or not. The third one, what to do to get your power back, is instead of dancing around trying to get approval from people who were never going to give it to you anyway, just stop dancing. just kind of go about your business and just release them. That little invisible rubber band that you have on them, like, come on, approve of me. Let me know I'm okay, that you love me. You can finally just like, you don't even have to let it snap. Just release it. And you might just be surprised that there's a little more space for people to come towards you. I'm not making any promises. I mean, the people who traumatized you, if they traumatized you when you were a kid, your beautiful child's imagination probably dressed them up a little bit and gave them a little bit more potential than they actually have to take responsibility for what they did and treat you right. I'm sorry to say it, but if you can just accept that that's often the case and go ahead and heal anyway, then anything that they come towards you with, any positive thing that they can contribute, is great. That's just nice. It's just like a cherry on top. The fourth thing, instead of avoiding conflict, do your footwork so that you can have conversations about what's bothering you. If someone's going to hurt you, if you speak up, step away from them. Never try to work things out with people who you think could physically hurt you or who are out to emotionally abuse you. There is no point. If you're worried that someone will abandon you if you speak up, okay, here's my radical advice. Let them. If people are prepared to abandon you because you need to talk about what's bothering you, it's going to be this incredible dance to hold on to them and make them stay. It's a drain of your power if you have to use your life force to try to keep somebody attached to you. If you're worried somebody will criticize you, just prepare yourself to hear it. If you haven't heard of my front porch concept, all right, think of yourself, of your heart, your feelings, your mind. This is your house, and out here you have a front porch. And so if people want to talk to you, and you're not really sure if they're safe or what their motives are, you can say, oh, fine. Just picture them talking to you on your front porch. And so you bring your attention out to the porch and go, sure, what have you got to say? And then they say it, and you decide, am I going to let what they said, or let this person into the house? Do I let it into my heart, or do I just consider it out here and go, and where I have the option to go, yes, I reject that. You can say you reject it to them, or you can just go, all right, well, thank you for your feedback. Bye. You don't have to get into it with anybody. Because the next one, the fifth thing, if you've been fighting everyone, there's avoiding conflict, and there's coming to the porch for the conflict, and then there's running off the porch and getting out there and fighting with everyone. Well, that probably means you have confusion about boundaries, what you can ask for from people, what it means when you don't get what you ask for. What people's intentions are when things feel disappointing. That is something that can get so messy when you're still you got some unhealed trauma wounds there. But fighting drains you. So speaking up is good. Fighting drains you. Just big, messy conflicts. Some of it can't be avoided. It's life. It's part of having relationships. But if you grew up in a household where there was violence or there was, horrible animosity, then sometimes there's this really bad well that opens up when you get into, trying to state what you need or listen to somebody else's criticisms. And it can get so tough. And I really recommend that you learn some techniques for staying regulated when you are trying to communicate things that are a little bit fraught or triggering for you. To stay regulated, you can take that, I'll put the link in here again, to the signs of dysregulation and emergency measures to re-regulate. And at the end of this, I'll also tell you about my free course where you can learn the techniques that I use every day. It's called the Daily Practice. All right. Fighting is a drain. Speaking up for yourself is empowering. Taking a bunch of random criticism is a drain. Being able to hear criticism on your front porch can be empowering, and it can be enlightening. You get to have a choice about what comes out and what comes in. And I know how hard it is when you have all that neurological dysregulation and emotional dysregulation from CPTSD. But that's what we do at Crappy Childhood Fairy. We learn how to master that. So everything becomes possible. The sixth thing was, instead of using intoxicating substances to cope with dysregulation, you can learn healthy ways to re-regulate. This, again, is where my daily practice comes in handy. It's very calming and soothing, and you must have a way to calm yourself and to soothe yourself. I'm not saying that hey, lady, calm down. Nobody wants to hear that. I certainly don't. But everybody needs to find ease and comfort, especially in emotional distress. And if you've sought help for your complex PTSD symptoms, even if you didn't have a name for, what is wrong with me, you've probably met with the thing where people are just like, calm down, think of this, not that, say this, not that. But it's all just such a jumble when it's going on. So this technique, the daily practice, it's a way of putting in writing what your fearful and resentful thoughts are. And those are just like, when you're dysregulated, when you're in a conflict with somebody. You get them on paper. You ask for them to be removed or release them, depending on, how you see the nature of reality. And then you just rest in meditation for 20 minutes and let your brain recompose itself. And I'm telling you, you will be amazed what a difference it can make just to do this easy thing that takes nothing more than a pen and paper and some 20 minutes, 30 minutes. You can't always do it in the middle of a conversation, but the more you can teach yourself to step away when conversations get intense like that, the better. And you can take a minute. And when I had been doing these techniques for 3 years was when I was finally able to let go of my 2-pack-a-day smoking habit. And I was definitely using cigarettes to stay regulated and to try to handle the intensity of things coming up. I had to have, as they say in AA, a sufficient substitute, right? If your thing is alcohol or drugs, definitely learning how to have that ease and comfort and get those thoughts out of your head is such a great. I know people who do just that to get clean and sober. Maybe you have another technique, but you can use that together. Just to always have, you have your pen, you have your paper, you always have a way to just calm down. And a lot of people will be like, take a deep breath. I just want to tell you, taking deep breaths has never been enough for me when my CPTSD symptoms are upon me. I always felt like that was just like a little bit light. It's a good thing, but it's not enough when the full thing's going on, when you're in bull in a china shop state of mind, right? The 7th thing. Instead of putting yourself down to other people, remember I talked about that, putting yourself down and fawning, just focus on letting go of what other people think. When you're working on yourself, you will have a much better sense of when you're doing something you don't feel good or dignified or proud of, and when you actually are okay. When you have confusion about whether you're being a good person and keeping it together, you're going to find yourself paranoid that other people are judging you all the time. And the fact of the matter is, they are. All those sayings like, it doesn't matter what other people think. But actually, if you're like being very rude or cruel or something and other people are going, wow, she's really rude and cruel, they would have a point. I feel like we don't say that enough. And there's so much like on Instagram, it's like, oh, it's, other people's criticism is always wrong. It's like, not so. Sometimes they're right. And CPTSD involves some difficult behaviors. But putting yourself down is never productive. So working on yourself, which you can do it with the daily practice. People do it in my membership program. They do it in 12-step programs. They do it with therapists. You can work on stuff where you're kind of undermining yourself or getting into self-defeating behavior. And every time you resolve one of those problems, it's like, woo, your head comes up, you feel good. And then you don't have that urge to put yourself down to other people. And the fawning instinct, comes from a childhood thing of like, if I'm nice to you, mommy, will you please not be mean to me? Will you please not leave? And it comes from that, right? So when you heal your trauma, when you heal your fundamental security, part of which is to feel good about your own ability to solve your problems, your own ability to take responsibility for how you treat other people. Like that feels good. It feels really good, and less insecurity is there and more security that, you know what? If somebody's just like, won't give me a break, I'm truly doing my best here and they're just endlessly criticizing me. It's just like, here's what you do. Whoop, just let them go. You don't even have to push them away. You can, but you don't even have to. Just release that hope that they're going to come around and like you or approve of you. You need to approve of yourself. And if you think, oh gosh, this criticism's about to come, let me preempt it. I'll put myself down first. It's not going to work anyway. It doesn't make them see what's so great about you. It tends to, they get a little bit of agreement for if they were actually thinking something bad about you. Now, I know sometimes we project that that people are thinking something bad about us, which is another reason not to just jump in there and go, I know, you're probably seeing what a liar I am or something. And then they'd be like, I hadn't really thought of it, but maybe, yeah. So don't give them that. Just work on yourself. Work on yourself and do your best to be a person you feel good about. All right, in the first round, we talked about overspending, spending beyond your means, going into debt, using credit cards to death. So instead of doing that, here's what you can do. You can begin keeping track of your spending and your bills, what you owe, what you spend, and what you earn. Now, I'm telling you, this is something that when you're in the middle of kind of dysfunction around this stuff, you are thinking, oh, I just can't look. I don't want to face it. It feels so good to face it. It can be really fun to start making a plan to go over, here's what happened, here's what my goals are, here's what I'm trying to save. You are not alone. If you have debt, you are not alone. It is so common for people to end up in debt, especially if you grew up with trauma, because first of all, the trauma causes poverty. You may have grown up with sort of like poverty thinking, and then it causes difficulty being in situations with other people. And being able to, be good with other people is so much how we earn money. Very few people have figured out how to do that without actually interfacing with other people. Having CPTSD can interfere with learning, and because, it's hard to pay attention. So you might be working with a few deficits, and you are not alone, and it's okay, and you don't have to be ashamed, but it's just time to start putting it together here. So one thing people I know who have struggled around money and debt is there's a 12-step program called Debtors Anonymous, and they have this thing that people do called a pressure relief group. I haven't done this myself, but I had friends who did it, and I always thought, gosh, that's brilliant. Like everything should have that, where a few people get together every week and they are really open with each other about what they owe. They bring their receipts, they talk about it. Like bring it out of secrecy and out into the open. You can do this with any kind of behavior like overeating or an addiction or anything that's starting to take you out of your, operating in your own best interest, is just bring it to the light of day with the support of other people. So I think that I've heard nothing but good things about that 12-step fellowship, Debtors Anonymous. You can check it out. You probably know exactly what to do. You make a budget, you pay down debts, you could do a snowball pay down or an avalanche pay down, and you can research all of that. I really like Dave Ramsey's book. I found that helpful when I got out of debt 10 years ago. It's hard to do when you're only thinking about your money sometimes. So it starts to become like a daily habit. And it's crazy how much when you can sort of put your positive attention on a problem every day and just sort of set aside time to deal with it, things just start to turn around like magic. I remember I started to do things like be careful about what gas station I went to. I used to just go to whichever one was convenient, but then I was like, it probably doesn't break the bank if I spend $3 more on gas this week. Petrol, for those of you in Britain. It probably doesn't make such a big difference, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to do the thrifty thing. I'm just going to keep doing the thrifty thing. And I got better about shopping and cooking at home. And I even would stop and pick up pennies when I saw them on the ground. Pennies are really not going to change my budget, but it was just the principle of the whole thing, the mindset of me getting into, I'm not going to let money just leak out of me, because that's what I'm teaching you here. Do not let your power drain out of you. And the money that you have in your possession that you are not leaking out all over the place is part of your power. It's part of your ability to make choices in the world. All right. The 9th thing is if you're an underspender, if you're not taking care of yourself, if your underwear drawer is shameful and you really hope nobody ever looks in there before you can get in there and throw out all those ripped, awful old undies and replace them with something new that fits you, that's appropriate, that you like, that you feel good in, right? And by the way, yes, it's possible to be both an overspender and an underspender, to be, hemorrhaging money out on vacations or trying to help somebody else, and then in your own drawers having shabby things and things that are not suitable for a person, in your place in life, your age, your more or less socioeconomic level. Do you have a decent pair of shoes that aren't stained? Do you have something nice to wear if you were to go to a dinner party? So many of us with CPTSD don't have that. And I think it got a lot worse during the pandemic when it just became possible to slump around, and maybe because of not feeling great about your body, you just don't have the right things to wear. So I'm just going to say, if that's resonating for you, you can get your power back by taking appropriate care of yourself. Remember I said nobody's coming to save you. People aren't going to come and just buy you a new wardrobe or tell you what to wear. Like, a little time and effort has to go into this. And I'll be honest with you, I am somebody who hates shopping. I get very triggered in department stores. It gets overwhelming within an hour. I don't know what it is. The sounds, the smells, the pressure, the old growing up poor memory of having to find exactly the right one thing that would have to suffice for all purposes, and getting like, I can't find one thing. And if I buy one thing and it doesn't work for this, I won't have anything. I just have this like old stuff that comes up. So how I take care of myself around that is I always shop alone. I drink a lot of water. I pause, I sit down, I take a break, and I get out of there. I just don't try to do it all at once. I will have a tendency sometimes to go, here, I'll just get 2 years of stuff at one store where I've just found a couple of things that fit, and I'll get all the colors and get that. Yeah, that's one way. It's one way, but like doing it that way is not really taking care of myself. And another part of your life to look at in terms of, are you spending a right amount of money, is bedding. Is your bedding suitable? Is it clean and comfortable for you? Is it the right temperature for you? So I've been very poor before and had to use, just a dirty old sleeping bag for a long period of time. And so I totally understand that. Sometimes that's how it is. But if you're in a certain place where you could have those things, but you don't bother to do it for yourself, it's possible that you're underspending, and it's a way that you're expressing low self-esteem and sort of telegraphing to the world if they ever, either keeping them out of your personal space. You don't invite people over, right? That's unempowerment, disempowerment to do that. But yeah, just shutting out parts of your life because you don't have the power to kind of meet life at a good place, at a good level, like wearing a nice, this shirt. I bought this shirt last year at a department store, I remember. And I remember I almost bought like 4 colors of it because I just like this shirt. It's comfortable, it looks okay. But I only bought one, and I thought to myself, if I really love the shirt, I can buy another one. All right, we talked about under-earning. And if you're under-earning, if you're not making enough money, then I cannot say enough about how important it is to have money, all right? A lot of people, and I think it's only people who have unlimited amounts of money, they're just like, hey, money's not really the important things. They have no idea what it's like not to have enough to eat. I do know, and I know what it's like not to have dental care. I know what it's like to have to stay in a bad relationship just to have somewhere to live, and I never, ever want to be in that place again. I'm so grateful to be able to earn a fundamental amount of money that means I have choices about where I am. And today I'm happily married. And so of course we live together, and it's a great situation. I am all about, though, saving for my retirement. I'm all about saving for us so that we have a suitable place to live throughout our lives, and helping my kids through college. And remember, I'm somebody who only got out of debt 10 years ago. So I'm very focused on that, and that's a way I take care of myself. And the signs that I'm not taking care of myself is a sense of dread and worry. And so sometimes maybe things are okay, but I haven't come to peace around it. And so I'm worried, or I'm thinking about what other people have, and I don't have that much. I still don't have the material stuff that I had always thought I'd have in life. I'm not there yet. But with a little luck, I think I might get there in my lifetime. But I also, because I've grown up poor and because I use my daily practice, I have a lot of confidence that I can make a pretty good go of my circumstances wherever I end up. I don't want to be homeless. I don't want to ever be stuck somewhere where I don't want to be. And so I take very good care of my earning. For people with CPTSD, one way it's done is you're not going for the opportunities that you're not working in a job that would pay enough. So I see a lot of people who are working in low pay jobs and then resentful all their lives that those jobs don't pay enough, but they don't pay enough for anybody. They don't pay the level that you would like to be earning, and then staying in the job, staying angry and like, this is not fair. And one example of this is teachers, right? My mom was a teacher. Some of the great people in my life were teachers, but as we know, teachers don't get paid very much. And we know that going in. So what I sort of have to say to people is, taking care of yourself means being very clear with yourself about how much you need to be earning. And if it's more than a teacher makes, then being a teacher may not be a good career for you. You need to go into something that pays better. Now, a lot of careers also require research. If you're not earning what you think you should earn, and the other way this can happen, it's like you don't go for the type of job or career, or you're in the career, but you resentfully, just get made invisible by people. You don't get offered raises or anything. As you may have heard, this is very common for women. asking for a raise. It feels too confrontational for many people. It was something I had a hard time doing. But you know what? I got a raise. I haven't had a job with an employer for a long time, but I did consulting. And in many situations, I had to raise my rates over time. And the hardest part of that was the inner job of just deciding that I was worth it and that I would work hard enough to continue to be worth it, that I would deliver work worth that. It was easier for my clients to accept pay rises, an increase of rates from me than it was for me to prepare that self. So it's an inner job. And you do that by doing the research, by dressing the part, by learning the skills that are needed. I can't tell you. I know a lot of people who are software engineers. I live in the northern part of Silicon Valley. And a lot of people are software engineers. And in some environments where software engineers work, there's a huge culture of learning, and people are always learning new things, and they're being cutting edge. And that tends to be a workplace culture that's really going to go somewhere and innovate. But other places end up with a workplace culture, and I'm just picking on tech people here, but this happens in all professions. And people don't learn new things. They're just very protected and defended and like, we've always done it this way. We don't do that. Oh, that's just somebody's opinion about some new thing. And they want to keep everything the same. Well, in technology, that doesn't tend to do very well. In all careers, it pays to read about your industry. It pays to learn about what interests you. And it pays to learn about things that are completely different than the work you do. Because sometimes getting outside of the work you do and learning about something stimulates your imagination so that you can contribute positively. And if you're going to increase your income, then contributing positively to the workplace, to the teamwork, to whatever's going on there is the number one thing that you're going to be able to do. You're going to need to be able to do that. It doesn't automatically get you a raise. You have to be good, and then you have to ask for the money that it warrants. And if that can't happen there, you need to have the guts to move on and find a new job, which also takes research and preparation and all that stuff. But power, I just wanted to talk a little bit more deeply about earning money. So often, people who are in an abusive relationship, and especially if they have children, feel like they cannot leave because they neglected their ability to make money. And neglect is a hard word. A lot of people stayed home to care for kids. But now they must get out. There needs to be a way out. I see nothing wrong with living in a shelter, getting welfare, whatever you have to do to get out of an abusive situation. But ideally, of course, no one wants to stay stuck there for long. It's an act of personal growth to learn things and take action in a direction towards where you're trying to go, which ideally is doing work that is meaningful to you and making enough money to live decently. Very important to be able to live decently. Studies show that beyond living decently, like more money doesn't necessarily increase happiness. Enough money that you have choices and you have sovereignty over your own life. You live where you would like to live. I don't live in a mansion. I might like to live in a bigger house, but I live in a safe place. That's what I mean. Another reason I want to give you for learning more, I talked about learning and neglecting your learning. If you've been neglecting your learning, one reason to really get into it is not only does it help, it put you in a more powerful position to do the kind of work at a level of pay that's more suitable for you, but it makes you more alive and it makes you a more interesting person. It activates something in your brain when you're learning, either reading a book that's challenging or taking a course, if it's online, if it's not. I'll admit, and I know some people have bought my course and they're like, I'm sorry, I never actually took it. And I'm like, I understand, I've done that too. But to actually engage in learning, it makes you more powerful, more interesting. It costs some of your free time. It might cost some of the time that you would otherwise spend socializing, and socializing is important too. But I promise you, when you increase your learning, it will dial up the quality of how you spend your time. It will dial up the quality of how you spend your time, and it will increase the wonderfulness of the people who are drawn to you and want to hang out with you. We're up to like the 12th thing here. If you've been staying friends with people who drain you and making you feel bad, it's time to talk to those friends about how you feel. Or if you're ready to let them go, you don't even have to tell them how you feel. You can just let them go. When you feel better about yourself, Your relationships will tend to evolve. The people who were never going to sort of come along and be respectful and kind and supportive of you, they will fade away. They often will fade away angrily. They don't like something. Oh, you think you're so great. But they will sort of take themselves out. The good people in your life, they might be there now. They might be people you are soon to meet, but they will come to you. They will be drawn to you because they match you. They are also at a level of growth and growing that is similar to yours. They won't resent your growth. They will like it. They will want what you're doing in your life to be a good influence on them. And likewise, they will be a good influence on you. The 13th thing, if you've been spending good years of your life in romantic relationships with people who chronically disappoint you, who hurt you, they can't grow with you, they can't commit to you, or they can't commit to themselves even, well, think of them as a room with a sticky floor. It's hard to leave. You can't get your feet up, right? But having a happy relationship begins when you get yourself out. It always feels like you're shutting the door on love, like you're giving up the only chance of love. But if that love is not making you loved, then the shortest path to being loved is out the door of that bad relationship. So if you're going to be in a relationship, aim for one that makes you feel good about yourself. That will be your sign. Like sometimes you'll be not sure, like, we have these differences, we have these qualities I like. But the number one sign is just like check in with yourself. How do you feel about yourself? Does this person bring out the best in you? Do they make you want to be a better person? Do they make you want to be more and do more, right? That's a sign. That's what they're talking about when they say that someone completes you, right? Their very presence in your life sort of draws you forward into a better version of yourself. All right, the 14th thing, if you've been neglecting yourself, your health, your hygiene, your appearance, sit down, get a piece of paper and pen, and make a list of 10 things you can do to take better care of yourself. And this is going to be, you know what they are, but I want you to write them down. Go take a walk, find a recipe to make a healthy meal, make an appointment to get your teeth cleaned. You know what you need to do, but you need to sit down and bring it into your consciousness, into the top of mind. So make a list of 10 things. If you make a list of 10 things and you tape it to the wall where you see it every day, begin to take at least one action a day towards doing that. Make the appointment for the dental cleaning, okay? Go take the walk. Make a date with your neighbor to take a walk. Arrange to walk somebody's dog for them. Just take the action and put it on your calendar to take at least one action on your list of things that need to happen for you every day. If you want to do more than one, great. But I'm always, with CPTSD, sometimes if you're going to be making positive changes, like let it be slow, let it be gentle, so that you don't have to quit and freak out and dive under the covers and hide from everything. Just a little at a time. Titration, a little at a time, adjust, a little at a time, adjust. That's how you can make some changes. All right, so if you've been doing too much, if you've been over-functioning, you've been giving your power away to other people, trying to show them how helpful you are, how totally on top of everything you are, trying to make sure that they value your friendship because, you're going to step in. You hear they're getting married and that's it. You'll take care of everything for them. You volunteer. That's what over-functioning is. And people who over-function will almost always tend to crash. They'll do a whole bunch of stuff and people start to count on them. I've done this and I've had people do it to me. And then boom, all of a sudden they do this like flip on you. They're just like, they're so angry. They're so angry because in their mind, they've been working on this complicated equation where they will not say anything, but they'll be so busy and helpful that something they want from you is going to come their way. And then you have no idea they're even doing this. And so you can't deliver. You don't even know what it is. And they're just like, boom. And then they cut you out of their life. Have you had that happen? Or have you done it to people? So we don't want to do that. We don't want to do that. It's very good to be able to be active, to function, but not do too much. Don't do so much that you're putting yourself in jeopardy of having to flip out and run. And if you're connected with somebody, either through your work or your personal life, with somebody who is like doing way more than their share of things, like see if you can talk about that with them. If you can get things out in the open about what they're doing, what they feel good about, what they were hoping would be reciprocal, you might be able to save the relationship from their flip out later. When their only way to set a boundary is to end the relationship. It's so sad, right? But it happens all the time. If you've been under-functioning, if you've been procrastinating, all right, you will think to yourself, there must be a magic pill for this, but there isn't. There's actually, what happens is you break the ice. You have to break the spell. Procrastination can become a spell by getting up and doing one thing. Do one thing that gets you moving and that brings you pleasure. Make it something that you actually like. Sometimes procrastination, it's like such a negative state that if you say, oh, I'm going to go, harvest all the broccoli and eat it for dinner, then I'll be like, no, I can't break the ice. So if you go, no, I'm going to make brownies and have one. It's easier to break the ice. I'm trying not to eat brownies myself. But that's the idea of breaking procrastination. You do one thing, and when you're getting started, make it something that gives you pleasure. So like all other changes we're talking about, releasing old coping mechanisms is going to create a little temporary moment where you feel empty. Have you had that happen? So when you finally stop over watching TV or overeating brownies or whatever it is, it'll be like, oh, I don't know. I feel anxious. I feel like something's missing in my life. I need something. I need a brownie. I need Netflix. It feels like that. All right. When you start to feel that emptiness, here's what I want you to remember. It's good. That's really good. The empty pocket is where it's the thing you're trying to fill, and you're going to be able to bring your attention to it. And it's where you can sit and do the footwork to face what is in here and in your heart. What is scaring you? What's keeping you angry? What's keeping you stuck? This again is where I recommend using my daily practice. That's where we get the fearful and resentful thoughts on paper, out of our heads on paper. You're going to surprise yourself how effective it is for reducing that hamster wheel thinking when you can get it on paper. It's a very specific technique, and I strongly invite you to come learn the specific technique. Don't just rant on paper. It's not a journal. It's not a journal. A journal is for remembering and recording. This is for, you just take out the trash. You're like, I have fear of this and fear of that, and I'm resentful at so-and-so because I have fear of blah, blah, blah. You get it on paper. You don't even have to write nicely. And then there's a thing that you write at the end that I call the sign-off, where you ask for this to be removed if you're inclined toward a higher power. If you are more working with your higher self, if you prefer to do that, you can release it, and then you rest your mind in meditation. All right, so that's free. You can sign up for it in the description section. The link is underneath every video I make down there, so you can always find it there or on my website. The 17th thing, instead of blaming other people for your problems, which causes you to lose your power, you can forget the role that other people have played in your past. Yes, I know that's sacrilege, right? You're supposed to talk about it and acknowledge it and grieve it. But I'm going to wager probably you've already done all of that. You've probably spent a lot of time talking about it, analyzing it, reading books about it, hoping that if you would just understand what happened to you enough, if you just were to talk about it enough, that you would begin to feel better. Now that could happen. It's certainly part of healing, certainly in the beginning. But if you've been doing that, if you've been paying for a lot of therapy, you're talking, and you're not finding relief yet, then something else might be needed to move you forward out of that. And that's again where the daily practice is. That's what it is. It helps you deal with what has to be dealt with, and then you can let go of the rest. It's a big release. Your healing doesn't always depend on talking, confronting, analyzing. Sometimes it's about naming, releasing, and then moving on with paying attention to your life today and trying to make it the best life you can. So it's a good exercise to look at your problems, even if someone has really pushed that problem on you, and just to ask yourself, what can I do to stop having this problem? Because usually, even if a problem was sort of dumped on you by somebody else's bad behavior, they're not going to fix it for you. It's you. You're the one. It's not fair, but here it is. Somebody's got to fix it, and it might as well be you. So ask yourself, is there anything I can do to solve this problem right now? And do what you can to detach it from the person who perpetrated the problem. There's very few problems that other people can solve. Some of the ones like that are like lawsuits and things, and that's one reason I have really tried to stay out of those in my life, because you can really get tied up for years trying to make other people a judge, a jury, the other person, the lawyers or whatever, to see it your way. And sometimes the most freeing thing, the most happy outcome is to be able to just wash it out of your hair, what happened, and move on. Sometimes. All right. The 18th thing, if you've been cutting people out of your life as a way to avoid difficult conversations, well, I want you to be able to have a choice in those moments. You can cut people out of your life, but it is something that you could exercise only when everything else that you could try has failed. So sometimes problems with other people can be worked out. And sometimes problems with other people, sacrilege again, sometimes they can be ignored. Not everybody in my life has my approval or agreement about everything they think and do. But that doesn't really have to be an issue because of the nature of my relationship with them. I don't have to worry about that. I don't have to tailor my life around it or make them change to be friends with them. Now, I know there are relationships that do need to end, and that will become clearer, especially when you're using tools to get those fearful and resentful thoughts out of your mind. Those can actually trap you in kind of a strange way of like blaming other people for stuff that's not their fault, blaming yourself for stuff that's not your fault, blaming yourself and thinking they're so great when it is their, it's just like our perception gets very warped. So you need a way to process your thoughts, especially the negative feelings, to process them. And sometimes processing them just means naming them, releasing them. And releasing them doesn't mean you're not going to deal with them or you're not willing to look at them. It just means that while you meditate for 20 minutes and take a rest, you're just like, there, come out of my mind, let my mind come together. And you'll usually find that only some of the things that were bothering you come back. Only some of them come back. And a lot of what's been bothering you, the fearful and resentful thoughts, they just drift away. They're just forgotten. And so when I do my techniques of the daily practice, I write my fears and resentments, I meditate, and I keep a pad of paper just in case I go, you know what? I really do have to send that rent check right now. I forgot. And I can write it down because even that'll start to be something I must think about. I can't just like relax right now. I'm afraid I'll forget. So you take care of business, and that's how you get your power back. And that's very empowering when you can when you can keep track of what you feel responsible for doing and let go of the stuff that doesn't need your attention. You just took all these power drains out of your life, and you could take all your power back and focus them on the things that you do need to do that are fruitful, that you choose. That is power. I would like you to have the power to save relationships that matter to you. That's a very important skill to have. So you can talk to people. You can talk when there's a problem, and when you trust yourself a little better to be able to handle the emotions that come up when you're honest about your feelings, you can be more confident about going and trying to patch things up with people. When you heal, you will become better at having healing conversations that help relationships and don't hurt them. When you heal, you'll become better at having healing conversations, and you can practice that when you have a little small rift sometimes and work your way up to bigger problems. All right, the 19th thing, if you've been staying too busy to ever focus on what needs healing in your life, oh, this is great. This is your chance. You get to do less now. Being overbusy starts as a way to help someone out or make extra money, but if it's a coping mechanism you're using, all this activity to avoid something in your life, it's time for you to have that quiet time and just let the awareness of the problem show you what it is. You don't have to solve it yet. Just allow it to enter into your mind, and your mind will begin to work it out. As you have less PTSD symptoms, your mind can do these projects for you just while you're sleeping. All right, if you've been consumed with somebody else's problems and it's been driving your life, it is time for you to bring the focus back to yourself. It's one thing if this other person is a child and you're obliged to keep taking care of them. And that's a hard situation, and help is available for that. But if it's a partner or friend, and you can't be that effective in solving problems for them, and there's a high probability that you're avoiding your own life by, trying to be the hero in their life. A lot of people are afraid that if they focus on themselves, they'll be lonely or bored or useless or just too consumed with themselves. But when you avoid yourself like this, you lose all your power. And guess what? You become lonely and bored and unable to be useful to anyone. Now, if you grew up with trauma, a lot of what I'm saying probably sounds good, but you don't know how to actually start. The place to start is with the daily practice course I teach. It's 2 techniques that help you get clear in your mind and calm in your emotions and empowered to take good common sense actions to build your power back up. I have this great tool that I use whenever I'm frustrated and confused about a problem in my life that I thought I was working on, but then I realize I'm not getting anywhere. I'm stuck. And this is a really simple tool. You can use it right now to break through and create a map that shows you the way out of the problem. And you're going to create a set of instructions for yourself to put right in front of you that you can begin to take action on. This is something you write down. I'll show it to you in this video as I do it for myself, all right? Now, whether or not you get the power to do everything you write or just one thing that you write, the act of writing it down has tremendous power in it. Sometimes just naming the changes that you need to make is enough to get that movement started, that step-by-step movement. So this is a thought exercise that I use in lots of areas of my life. When I feel like I'm not making progress fast enough or I've lost my focus, it's a great question to ask yourself, if I had to solve this problem inside of a year, what would I do? So it could be something like, if I had to earn X amount of money in a year, how would I do that? Or if I had to be able to run an 8-minute mile 3 months from now, what would I need to do? And then I list at least 10 things, okay? So the money example's real. When my first marriage fell apart and I had 2 little kids, I had to figure out really fast how to go from earning about 25% what I'd need to survive as a single parent to 100% of what I'd need to survive as a single parent. And later, I used this tool to plan my next step up, how I'd get past survival and create a business and a life that would let me pay off my debts, start saving, and be a good mom, and eventually meet somebody new. So people with childhood PTSD, we get fuzzy a lot of the time on seeing, I'm having a problem, and if this problem is going to be solved, I'm going to have to solve it. Like, that's kind of the obvious thing, but it can be very hard to see. With trauma, you may have ended up feeling like you were waiting for something or somebody outside yourself to change, and then you could change. And that's the heart of the problem. So I'm giving you a homework assignment that you can do yourself, and I'll put the link. It will be down below in the description section. You can download it, you can print it, you can follow along with me, or just listen to how I do it and then download it, and you can do it for yourself. So it's called, If I Just Had 1 Year to Heal My Childhood PTSD, What Would I Do? Right? All right. So I know 1 year is like a tight deadline to heal something as huge as childhood trauma. And healing never follows a planned timeline anyway. But don't worry about that. This is a thought exercise. It's there to open up and stimulate your thinking. So today I'm going to tell you my list. And I've got the benefit of knowing all the things that I did do to heal from childhood PTSD. But I did them over a period of more than 25 years with lots of downtime and being off track during whole chunks of time. So I thought I'd share with you the benefit of my hard-won wisdom. If I could do it all over again, this is how I would do it. If I had to heal my childhood PTSD inside of a year, the first thing I would do is I would learn the science of complex PTSD and childhood PTSD. And childhood PTSD is a casual term that I use for the kind of complex PTSD that comes from childhood trauma. Complex PTSD is any kind of intense stress that happens over time, but in most cases, people with CPTSD got it in childhood, but not necessarily. So the books about the science were not out when I first started healing. But if I started right now, I would take the ACE survey, which is a set of questions to kind of measure how bad was the trauma. I'd get my score. I'd read The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. I'd read Complex PTSD by Pete Walker. They weren't written yet when I started healing, but they're there now. So that's what I would do like right away. And there are lots and lots of other books out there, but that's where I'd start, those 2 books. Now, if I had had access to these books, it would have saved me decades of thinking I was a broken person and hopeless, and for some mysterious reason, just always struggling. It turns out my symptoms are totally normal for somebody who had experiences like mine. I'm not broken. I'm normal. I'm having normal responses to abnormal circumstances. Second, I learned to notice the neurological dysregulation that is such a foundational symptom of childhood PTSD. and I'd work to master re-regulation. The first thing I'd start doing is the daily practice techniques that I now teach to everybody, to hundreds of thousands of people. And this is the twice daily writing of fears and resentments in a very specific format. And you can learn and try that in less than an hour if you care to. There's a link to that free daily practice course in the description section below all my videos. After the writing, the second part of the daily practice is meditation. It's a very simple, restful meditation. Yes, twice a day. So that's what happens twice a day in the daily practice. Write and meditate first thing in the morning, and then later in the afternoon, sometime before dinner is the ideal time, write and meditate. So the writing and meditation together have a powerful effect. If you want to know what it's like, use the specific technique that I teach and just try it. Just try it. Everybody can try it. And if you take that course, you can join me in free Zoom calls that I lead twice a month for anybody who's learned the techniques and wants to come practice them with me and ask questions. So as it happens, I did learn the daily practice 28 years ago, but back then I had no idea what was wrong with me or why using these techniques made me feel better. I just knew that I felt better. But I also went into resistance and I stopped doing it regularly. And I now know this was like opening a terrible portal for all my CPTSD symptoms to come back. So if I had my healing to do over again, I'd quit messing around and I'd just be religious about my daily practice, and I'd really do it thoroughly, twice a day without fail. And I would not quit because somebody in my life found it inconvenient. And I would not quit because things didn't always go my way. What I know now is that when things don't go my way, a lot of times that is progress. That's what it looks like, is something that's not working falls away. Also, it's just safe and smart to keep up your healing practice through good times and bad. So that leads me to the third thing I do to heal in a year. I'd quickly get out of all the unhealthy, dead-end, one-sided relationships with significant others and would-be significant others where one of us had feelings, but not both. Sometimes it was me, sometimes it was them, but basically one person who didn't have feelings was kind of using the person who did have feelings because, I don't know, it's kind of fun to have somebody adore you, I guess. But unfortunately, it costs both people their emotional availability. And neither person will tend to find true love when they're entangled in this kind of, friendship. So I'd end all of that right off the bat. And then the fourth thing I'd do is become really good at happily spending time alone. This is the difference between solitude, which is happy time alone, and isolation, which is sort of involuntary time alone. I used to have so much anxiety about solitude, and so I'd fill up all my free time doing social things that I didn't really want to do and hanging on to friends I didn't really like, just so I didn't have to be alone. Now, I know a lot of people with childhood PTSD have the opposite problem, and I've been in that camp too, isolating and avoiding social interactions. So if I had 1 year to recover, I'd cut down my relationships to just the ones that involved no pining on either person's part, no one using the other person to fill up the seat next to them at the movie, and only people where we both truly cared to know and support each other. That's what a friend is. It's somebody who really wants the best for you and shows an interest in that. For me, it would have meant more alone time. And in my years of recovery, I've discovered there's actually so much joy in having constructive time alone. Not too much, but some. And to be good at it gives you freedom so that you don't have to cling and hold on to relationships just because you can't deal with the thought of a weekend alone. A weekend alone can be wonderful. You can take trips alone, visit museums alone, go hiking alone. You can work alone. You can go to the movies alone. And after the pandemic, actually going to the movies at all is right up there with my great joys. So today I have a family and I love being with them too, but learning to enjoy my time alone has set me up to be free to make choices about being with people or having some joyful solitude, and it makes me happy. So the fifth thing I do is stop spending my money on two things that I was using out of desperation to feel better: therapy and cigarettes. I know saying therapy is a shocking thing. Let me explain. So first of all, quitting smoking is obvious, right? And I was able to do that after about 3 years of healing. Very expensive habit. Quitting therapy was counterintuitive, and that happened about the same time. So I realized that therapy is really helpful and often even life-saving to people on this channel. If you've watched my videos, you've heard my own story about how, for me personally, talking about my trauma in therapy was dysregulating and emotionally and neurologically destructive. And after trying out 11 different kinds of therapy over the years, it was the daily practice where I can write my fearful and resentful thoughts that set me free from the life I was living, stuck in my narrative, with looping and looping on the bad things that had happened to me and waiting for some kind of better mental state to just kick in. In therapy, that better feeling never came. In the daily practice, which happens to cost nothing, it was like the sky opened. In the daily practice, I just had to do it over again. That's all. All I had to do was repeat, but it was always in my hands to do that. So when I started having that way to kind of release all the intense emotion of having CPTSD, all the losses, all the struggles, everything started to calm down. So that allowed me to stop smoking. And about the same time, I was able to transition easily out of therapy. And then I saved thousands and thousands of dollars. So if I had it all to do over again, I would have magically found the daily practice much earlier in my life. I would have gotten rid of the cigarettes much earlier. I would have completed my therapy much earlier. And I would take all that money I spent and I'd put it in tech stocks. And now I'd be a jillionaire. Oh, well. The sixth thing I would have done if I had it all to do over again. And no one ever told me this back then, but it's strong exercise. It is so good for re-regulating. It's good for calming emotions. And who'd have guessed? It's good for your heart, your lungs, your muscles, and pretty much everything in life. So now that I exercise, I have so much more confidence in the world. I feel prettier. I feel healthier. I feel younger, even though I'm way older than I was back in those days when I did not exercise. Okay, the seventh thing I'd do if I had it all to do over again, I'd stop all the negative stuff in my life, starting with my own trash talking of other people and their opinions, their religion, their politics, their taste in food, their music, their choice of partners, pretty much everything. And I would instantly challenge myself on all my negative beliefs that require black and white thinking. And, these people are good, those people are bad, this person's perfect, this person's evil. And I'd completely embrace the understanding I have now that everything is complicated and we're all working out a way to do the best we can. And I'd quit being so judgmental. I'd quit telling people how they should change. I'd stop putting myself down. I'd delete all the music I used to listen to that was about death and heartache and revenge and being crazy and getting betrayed and self-pity. Or I'd delete most of that music anyway. I mean, some of it's kind of good, right? But I know that it affected me in a bad way. I know that it can be trauma triggering just listening to music about despair. The eighth thing that I'd do is I'd be a better friend. I'd go to people's weddings when they invited me. I'd call them back when they called. I'd accept them and not abandon them just because I was triggered or busy. And the ninth thing is I'd be a good worker. It took me so long to learn this. When you take a job, your job is to make the boss and the organization successful, period. And I used to make everything so much about my feelings and how I was treated, which sometimes was awful. And the jobs where it felt like that, where that's what I was experiencing, those are the jobs that I was supposed to leave, but I didn't. I hung on to those jobs and just kept waiting for other people to change. And I complained and I talked behind people's backs about it, but I stayed, and I regret that. So that's something I would do differently. I would move on to a job more aligned with my own values, my own abilities, and my goals. And then I would enjoy doing my very best. I love doing my best. That's a very happy thing, actually. The 10th thing I do, and I'm happily married now, so this one is moot now, but it would have changed my whole life if I'd have learned this earlier. If I were single and I had 1 year to heal, I would learn to date. I never knew how to date. I thought that dating was just finding yourself all in an emotional bond with somebody because you already had sex with them. And there was a mutual attraction that drove you to that. And then retroactively, you would try to change them into the person that you were hoping they were in the first place. No, it turns out dating is supposed to be a getting to know you process with people to see if they might be someone with whom you'd later want to become committed to. And in my case, I knew that I wanted marriage. I always knew this is what I wanted. But you wouldn't know it by who I dated or how I handled myself in those relationships. I know my confusion around this was from my childhood hurts. But the trauma that bad relationships brought into my life was probably even worse than the trauma from childhood. And worse, even than that, I caused other people to suffer. So I'd completely change that if I had to heal in a year. Zip, done, goodbye. So that's my 10 things. And if you're in my courses, you've done this type of exercise before, because I'm all about how good it feels to face the truth, even when you thought it would be terrible, and then to take really practical steps to make changes. So you deserve those changes. You deserve a good life. If you want to write your 10 things down, I made the worksheet and I put the link below where you can download it. I'm not checking your homework. This is just so you can try this exercise and see if it inspires you and helps you make a map of and dream big about your next steps. It's not a crazy goal to change your life in a year. Some parts of your healing are going to take longer, of course. But if you're ready and you're willing to do what it takes, jump in. There's so much that can start feeling better quickly. You probably already know what to do. And if sticking with your resolutions or your intentions to change is hard for you, one thing you can do is get support. One way you can do that is to become a member of Crappy Childhood Fairy. Membership is the inner circle, and you get access to all my courses, my monthly webinars, the group coaching calls I lead twice a week that are just for members, and an incredible group of fellow travelers, people, men and women who take part in our secret Facebook group, supporting each other, organizing daily practice calls at different times throughout the day, just enjoying friendship with people who understand what it's like to have CPTSD and who are walking the same positive path of healing that you are. So you don't have to accomplish everything you write on your list of 10 things that you would do if you had only a year to heal. But doing the exercise might energize you to stay on the good path and open your mind to what's really possible for you. Everything is possible for you. Childhood trauma is a thief of your mental focus, your confidence, your energy, your love. But you deserve to recover those things. They're yours. Recover what is yours. Be bold and become your full and real self at last. You're beautiful. You are real. Don't let anybody tell you that it has to take forever for you to become fully real and fully beautiful as you were meant to be. You were born for this. You're made to heal. This is your birthright, and you've already come this far. So be proud of yourself. I love you, and I'm so proud of all you have done to recover and bring your love and your light to this world. We need you, and we're on this path together. So many things that we've been told about healing our lives and recovering from old traumas is wrong. Have you noticed this? The wisdom a person needs to live a good life, to grow past the bad things that happened. I know people knew this at one time, but it's like it got broken up into pieces and tossed up with a lot of other ideas. And I started figuring this out years ago when I used to go to a lot of 12-step meetings. And I went to thousands of them over the years, and sometimes the same meeting every week for years. I'd just go. I would see the same people over and over again. And I had the opportunity not only to work on myself, but to observe other people who were making incredible progress. They were totally changing their lives like before my eyes, and they were shedding old problems, and it was really attractive. And these people were, a really positive influence on me. But I also had the chance to observe people who didn't make any progress. And this really shaped me too, and in fact formed my whole philosophy about how to heal and change your life and how you maybe don't want to approach it. Because you'll notice not a lot of people succeed at healing their trauma. It's not like an automatic given. And a lot of people reach out for help, but it's rare that anybody really breaks through, like really blossoms. It's a huge deal when someone does. And back when I was really struggling with what I now know were childhood PTSD symptoms, I was scared that I'd end up stuck like so many people in the meetings I went to. But I was determined to find a way to do it, to be one of the people who heals and changes. And so I was paying attention and taking notes, and I sought mentorship, not just in 12-step, but in like a few different disciplines. And so when you come to my channel, you'll notice that how I approach healing is something different than what's out there. I'm very direct. I teach people to be honest with themselves, self-directed, have sovereignty over their healing. And I bring in a lot of common sense wisdom, but I'm also very countercultural when you hold up my philosophy, and it is a distinct philosophy along with a set of techniques. But when you hold up my approach against the mainstream mental health world and their approach and their beliefs about what trauma is and how to heal it, well, there's differences, and I want to talk about those differences. Now, I have an open mind to the fact that different people respond to different things, but I think there are some really negative and limiting and even destructive ideas out there. And just in case those ideas are all you ever got and you're feeling hopeless or stuck, like healing can't happen for you, I want to present an alternative that might help you get a breakthrough. Now, I love doing this work because all day I'm witnessing and communicating with people who are getting that breakthrough. And I feel strongly that everyone deserves this chance to heal from their trauma. And I'm very driven by this mission. And I've always been interested in how people who are struggling with depression and trauma can heal and make positive changes. It was so hard to get real information about that for me when I needed it. But I had that breakthrough, and the healing work it's a lifelong project. It's a happy project, but I'm never done. I don't think anyone ever is. It's something we're always working on. We're always, it's kind of like a condition that you maintain. And I'm unfolding as a person, just like you are, just like everybody is. So I have complex PTSD. And now that I know what it is, I can see that I've always had it. I had a rough childhood. I've talked about it in my courses and on my videos. It was mostly because my mother had severe alcoholism, and that brought in all the problems that go with alcoholism. And I'd say the CPTSD symptoms, I first remember them when my mom moved us to a new state when I was 9, away from my father, and I lost him, and I lost my support system. So I was isolated. And it got worse in my teens when I started having sex. And it's common for kids who were abused to sort of fall apart at that point in their lives. And then I got my heart broken. Then I got my heart broken a whole bunch. And then I really got my heart broken in my late 20s. And at about the same time, I was a victim of a violent crime. And also in the same couple of weeks, my mother died. So I was effed up. I was not just sad, I was scared, I was freaked out. And that's when it became obvious that something was really wrong with me. And there was no name for it. And it also became obvious that doing normal mainstream therapy not only wasn't helping me, but it had never helped. And in fact, I think it was kind of making it worse. So I thought I was some kind of really extra screwed up person. I was convinced that my therapist was judging me, like for being so unresponsive to things that were helpful to people in normal cases. And they definitely didn't know what was wrong with me or what to do, but they thought they knew what to do. And they didn't really address the self-defeating behaviors that were all over my life and creating an extra load of trauma and drama. Like 80% of my trauma at that point was self-created stuff. There was the childhood that led me to the self-defeating behavior, but those behaviors were then really bogging me down. So yeah, my therapist had me talking about my feelings, about my memories, and it was literally making my symptoms worse and worse. Now, to be fair, therapists back then didn't know what was wrong because there was no name for it. And the name we now know, it's complex PTSD, and that's the kind that comes from chronic exposure to intense stress, usually in childhood. Doesn't have to be, it could be at other times in a person's life. And it seems obvious now, if you know what it is and you've had a chance to check that knowledge with your experience of struggles and healing from what happened to you. But even now, most mental health professionals don't have a working knowledge of complex PTSD. A lot of people, doctors, therapists, mental health programs, they say that they're trauma informed, but that's really a subjective term. And, what do they mean by that? You have to ask. And what do they propose that a person does if they have CPTSD or trauma? So you'll notice there's a lot more talk about the problem of trauma than the solution to it. How do you actually heal? And that's what my life's work has become. So I hit the end of the road and I was hopeless about all avenues of help available to me. This was back 29 years ago now. And then something happened and I healed. Not overnight, of course, but, in bursts. And I had a big burst of healing when I first found the techniques that I still use every day. I've been using them ever since I was first shown. And that's the daily practice. That is a set of techniques. I teach them for free. It's a free course. It's always down in the description section below every video I make. So you can always access that. And I'd love it if you did. If you take the course, you can come join me on free Zoom calls that I lead every couple weeks. So I'd love to meet you there. I answer questions. We use the techniques together. And you can see if they help you as much as they help me to calm your CPTSD symptoms. But back then there was a core hole in my spirit that got healed all at once in a short amount of time. And I had a lot to work out after that, big problems in my life. And I'm still not perfect or perfectly healed, but I don't get into trauma-driven problems like I used to. And when I hit trouble, I know what to do. And that's what I teach here and in my courses and workshops and coaching, an alternative self-led path to healing that can help whether you have access to professional help or not. Now, in some ways, it's a radical approach. Now that I'm writing a book about it, and I realize how much all the videos here are they're like a sea urchin. They're like little spikes of information. I'm putting out one video is a spike and here, and I talk about this and this. And so now writing the book demands that I be linear and that I weave my lessons around a coherent philosophy, which I've known for years. I know my philosophy, but I don't think I've ever articulated it all at once. My philosophy informs every video I make. And so I want to have it all laid out in one place and in one video, and this is it. Are you ready? Okay. I have 8 principles, and the first one is trauma is an injury, not an identity. So we used to think of symptoms of trauma as primarily psychological, right? We now know that they're largely neurological. And by extension, they're physiological, because neurological means nervous system. And your nervous system not only governs, your nerves, your brain, it governs your whole body. And it affects your emotions, it affects your hormones, your immune system, your sensations when you feel like it's time to go to sleep. It governs your physical life. And so when you have a neurological injury, which is what trauma is, it can affect everything in your body. And that explains what we now know, that a history of early trauma can really increase your risk, not your certainty, but your risk of serious health problems. Not just the things that we've always kind of known, like depression, anxiety, bad relationships, we've known that, but it can also give you heart attacks, strokes, diabetes, obesity, reproductive disorders, endocrine disorders, immune disorders, learning disabilities, problems with memory, an increased risk of dementia. Ooh, that one scares me. So there's almost no bad thing on earth in people that isn't made worse by trauma. So we have every incentive to heal. Okay, so also part of this injury is that adult symptoms of childhood abuse and neglect ruin lives. They ruin careers, like so many careers. They ruin relationships and they ruin families. The effects of trauma, we kind of knew this instinctively, but when you really measure it out, if you look at people who are incarcerated, there's such a high rate of traumatized people in there. If you look at people with addictions, if you look at people with grave mental health disorders, all of it is made so much worse by trauma. So that's starting to be finally dealt with. As a person with CPTSD, I can sort of say we're the most expensive people in the healthcare system. And so there's an incentive not just for us, but for the whole system to find a better way to help us. I don't think they've done it yet. They talk about it, they're not there yet, but that's what we're doing here, is practical ways to start bringing those symptoms down. And I can definitely say my health improved dramatically 29 years ago. I feel healthier, more energetic, more alert than I did at that age. And it's thanks to being able to re-regulate my thinking, my nervous system, to bring my vital signs kind of back into alignment through using my tools. I use my tools, and that's, again, my daily practice. You can learn that too. The effects of early trauma are more serious than they realized, and they're more wide-ranging. And it's not just the obvious stuff. And CPTSD, it can't be cured, but the symptoms can be healed. And I do think of it something like diabetes, where you may have it, but you can reverse your symptoms by changing how you do your day, what you eat, what medicine you take. For us, there also is a way of living that can help turn those symptoms back around. And if you do that, you can have like continued good health and keep going. And then if you sort of fall apart, the symptoms come back. So that's how I experience CPTSD. And if it were to get worse, especially as we get older, if it were to get worse, the symptoms could become more grave. So I just want to emphasize, it's so important. It's so important to address your symptoms. You may not know what caused your symptoms. You may never know, and that will be okay if you can learn to calm your symptoms. All right, the second principle, dysregulation is an almost universal symptom among traumatized people. People don't talk about this. You may have never been told. But neurological dysregulation, it's a nervous system phenomenon. It can be measured in the brain. It can be measured in your vital signs. And easily observable signs that you might notice are things like difficulty focusing, your heartbeat being irregular, going up randomly or just too high, feeling clumsy, feeling emotionally overwhelmed, or once you've gotten emotionally overwhelmed and maybe, expressed anger that was kind of over the top, then going emotionally flat, like you feel nothing. And even your thinking will be like, I don't care. And there's this weird silence after intense outbursts. Well, that could be neurological dysregulation if you relate to that. Now, everyone is sometimes dysregulated, and most people will eventually re-regulate, but dysregulation seems to be exacerbated by traumatic experiences, and the brain changes that as a result. And so people with CPTSD will get dysregulated more often, more intensely, and they'll have a harder time coming back out of dysregulation. So luckily that can be healed. But dysregulation is responsible for, a wide range of the symptoms that we associate with trauma. Like, why does trauma cause people to have a higher probability of getting lupus or MS? Why does having a history of trauma make it so hard to heal tissue? Like, I got stuck in the hospital once for over a month. I could not heal. And it was at an extremely traumatic time in my life. And I had surgery after surgery after surgery. And they kept saying, we don't know why, but you're, just everything keeps breaking down after we operate. And then I got back, I had left my daily practice techniques. And then I came back to them. I just came back and started really working on calming. I didn't know what dysregulation was at the time. I didn't know what CPTSD was. I just knew that I was really freaked out again. And I pulled it way back using my techniques. And then I healed. Then my body healed. And so I've had physicians tell me, physicians who know what trauma is, yeah, probably I was somaticizing my trauma, which means sort of expressing it physically, like the trauma plays out with limited blood flow or, poor immune response to infection. I was having a lot of infections. I kept hemorrhaging, I was having all these problems. And then my body kind of pulled it together. And it pulled it together when I was addressing my trauma symptoms. So again, I did not know that was trauma, but later I looked back and it's like, that's what it was. My daily practice that I was using the whole time. It was calming my symptoms. And the effect when I'm using my tools consistently is always like an improvement in my physical well-being and my mental focus. So dysregulation also has cognitive elements. There's emotional disruption. And I would say emotional, developmental delays. And so there's this damage or delay to our ability to connect with other people, our ability to kind of read the room and sense what other people are feeling, how to face up when things are awkward and how to apologize or how to ask someone out. All that stuff, it can get delayed because trauma is it's doing something with the neurological injury that's a little hard to connect. That's what it feels like to me. And it's consistent with some of the research that I've seen. Now, self-defeating behaviors that result directly from dysregulation and from the injury of trauma. Self-defeating behavior, I feel like, does not get addressed adequately. And I don't know, I saw something like 11 therapists, and they were always very ready to talk about what my mom had done, what the suffering was in my life. But in terms of the mistakes that I was actively making that were making my life terrible and driving people away, I had a harder time getting help, and I guess, I don't know if they didn't understand or relate, or if they were trying to go easy on me. They thought it would be too distressing for me to be confronted or criticized about stuff that I was doing to mess up my life. And I ended up, what I ended up learning, my daily practice, as well as, getting some, like a big truth bomb in my face, was from a woman who was a peer who showed me the daily practice. And she was just like, yeah, you have to stop hurting people. You have to stop being selfish. And I was like, what? Nobody had ever told me that. Like, there was a lot of talk about how other people had been bad, but just it never came back to me. And I was so ready, because the beautiful thing, when you realize like it was you who was making a lot of the mistakes, it was you who was being rude, selfish, using people socially. Yeah, I had a lot of stuff going on. But when you know it's you, it's like, guess what? It's something you can change. Now, what my mom did, I couldn't change. My mom died before all this, she died at the beginning of my healing process. Not a coincidence. Like, I started healing as a result of all the pain that was in my life at that time. And that's when I could begin to get honest with myself about the role my self-defeating behaviors played. Some of the attitudes I had were social or cultural, and some of it I learned from my mom. I grew up, part of the time my childhood was in a commune. It was very crazy, druggy, people having sex on the floor, that kind of thing. And, it wasn't exactly a great moral education for me. And it's not like I didn't learn anything about like a good way of life or what was a way to be a good person. There's a lot of ways to pick that up. A little bit from my parents, from some good teachers, friends' parents, TV, good old TV, Where would we be without it? Like, how should I act? What is a good person? So I learned all of that, but a lot of my suffering and a lot of the ways I was doing self-defeating behavior was from cultural messages like, hey, I have to be authentic. I have to be myself. I have needs. I was just kind of like taking those things a little too far. I didn't know any better. So these three, which is dysregulation, disconnection, and self-defeating behavior, they flow into each other and they make each other worse. They can also make each other better, but when your trauma symptoms are getting the better of you, it's usually like a ping pong between those 3 points: dysregulation, disconnection, and self-defeating behavior. Now, all three of those things, there's one thing that activates them, and it's triggers. So learning to calm triggers, and this is the fourth principle, learning to calm your triggers is the starting place to break the cycle. If you can calm your triggers, an ordinary, natural healing process can follow. If you've been trying to heal and trying to heal and trying to heal, and you keep, you get 2 steps forward and then 10 steps back, it's probably that your triggers haven't been addressed. And these days, people say triggered, it can refer to anything really, like something you don't like or you disagree with. But when we're talking about triggers in the context of trauma, we mean something that sets off the neurological dysregulation. A stimulus happens, and for reasons you can't totally understand or control, a nervous system reaction kicks in. Your heart's pounding, your thinking gets distorted. Really, if you do a brain scan, left front cortex is going down, less activity. Right front cortex is your emotional center. It's going up. What's going down over here is reasoning. So less reasoning, more emotion. That's what it feels like to be triggered. The way people talk about triggers, it's as if it's other people's problem that they do it. But what the problem is that we react to stimulus that way. That's the problem. You can learn to calm it. And it's a lot more productive to learn to calm your reaction to things that trigger your neurological dysregulation. Way more productive than trying to get other people to stop being themselves. People are going to people, right? Stuff is going to happen. People are going to overlook you. They're going to criticize you. They're going to reject you. This is always going to be part of life. They're going to not get you. They're going to team up with each other and leave you out. All that stuff, that's hard for a person with CPTSD. But when you learn to calm your triggers, it can't set off that boom, dysregulation, disconnection, self-defeating behavior. So you can practice this and you can strengthen yourself. Practiced and strengthened against triggers. Now, calming can largely be accomplished through simple techniques that you manage yourself. You don't necessarily need to see a professional for this. These are things that many generations for thousands of years have known about how to start calming down the nervous system. And if you ask me, it should be the first line of treatment. And it includes things like intense exercise, doing something that involves the left side of the body and the right side of the body, like marching, And actually, when you do one of these exercises with other people, it magnifies the beneficial effect. And so that's interesting, right? For thousands of years, soldiers have marched. And then they also will sing or chant together, hey, hey. And doing that together with other people, the voice, the body, it's how people re-regulate. Nobody maybe knew that's exactly what was going on, but people have figured this out. And I think that if people are like fighting in a battle, you bet they're triggered. Their trauma is activated. It's going on right now. And so it's only practical that they learned how to sort of bring their nervous system back into line so that they could manage their bodies and their body systems and pay attention and sleep at night. All of those things are critical for anything intense like battle, right? And so we can learn from that, how people did that. Singing together is re-regulating. And then sometimes like a little shock to your senses. It could be like a cold shower or warm hand washing, something that reminds you of your senses. You plunk down in a chair. I have a sheet, and I'll remember to put this down in the description section below. It's a sheet about the 10 emergency measures you can use to re-regulate yourself. Very good to keep handy, like carry it with you. So those are the emergency measures. And then the ongoing measure for re-regulation that I teach is the daily practice. And that's always down below too. So I recommend that for everybody, whether or not you have access to professional help. This lack of awareness or focus or solutions for treating dysregulation is why conventional methods have been so minimally successful to treat complex PTSD. There is poor evidence of good efficacy. It's marginal. And a little bit, you might even question it because, especially where drugs are involved, there's this incentive to hand select the studies that are included in, the measurement of is it effective. And there's ways that you can really jigger the research to make it look like something's more effective than it is. But it's, placebo, therapy, medication, they're all kind of close. And physical exercise, intense physical exercise, has recently been shown to be at least as effective as therapy or meds or both. And I just remember when I had acute PTSD, nobody told me that. They were ready to just slap me on some medication. And I didn't want to do that because I had had this powerful experience when I first got my daily practice of having my depression go away. But then something really bad happened and I got into like adult onset PTSD symptoms, which had me looping and looping on the memory of the bad thing and going into sort of like adrenal overdrive. My heart would pound. And I was getting worn down. It was going on for a year and a half. And I finally mentioned it to a doctor. And I had been in therapy for months at that time. They were like, oh, you got to get on medication. But I didn't want to. And I said, hold on. And I got online and I researched. And there were a few things that I could do that I thought I just wanted to try first. And it was intense exercise. So for 45 minutes, I would run or I would like walk up a hill, something to get my heart going and get sweat going. I drank a lot of water. I stopped eating sugar or consuming alcohol. And guess what? My PTSD symptoms went way down, like most of the way. And sometimes if you can go from here to here with those symptoms, from here, you've kind of got it. It's no longer getting the better of you and you can start to manage better. And that's what happened for me. I did those simple interventions and didn't have to go on the medication. So talk therapy is largely focused on noticing feelings and recounting memories. And while this is counterintuitive, talking about your trauma can be a trigger for dysregulation. And when you're dysregulated, you can't really process emotions or memories. Even if you had some sort of breakthrough, you would have a hard time remembering what happened during your therapy session. And that's what happened to me. I remember thinking, oh, this is kind of good. But there would be between sessions, I would just regress. I would just go right back. But it became very clear to me that talking about trauma was dysregulating to the point that it was counterproductive. Now, I recognize everybody needs at some point to talk about what happened, especially, maybe right after it happened or as you're trying to figure out or before you've ever gotten validation that, yeah, that's a trauma, that's really hard. You deserve care about that. You should have had something better. So we all need that. There's a brain pathway when you talk about trauma that can set off the whole neurological dysregulation. James Pennebaker, University of Texas at Austin, has written about this. He's done a lot of research on it, writing about harsh things that happen in trauma, is a way that you can get it out without having to re-trigger the language center of your brain, which is where, for whatever reason, it goes off. It's a calmer way to get it out. And when I've written something like that, I can then read it to somebody. And that's what my friend showed me. She was like, write your fears and resentments. This is a specific technique. So don't just go off what I'm saying in this video. Take the free course if you want to try it. But you write the distressing thoughts, and then you meditate, and then you read to somebody what they are. And that is a way that I can share with another person and get support if I want it about what happened without talking about it. But that really changes the game. And this is where my principles kick in. If you become a member and you join our secret Facebook group, we have like one of our guidelines is like, go lightly with talking about what happened to you. Like, we understand, but a lot of people's first instinct when they get into a healing community is, I just want to tell you what happened to me. And I understand that instinct, and it's what we were conditioned to do. It's what we were told would make us feel better. And if it does make you feel better, by all means, go do that. But not in our community. We're doing something. We can touch on it. You can say, well, I was abused as a kid. There was physical abuse. There was sexual abuse. You need not go into detail with us, because most of us understand. And that way you're communicating what happened, and then what everybody's helping each other with is, and so today what I'm struggling with is trust, or expressing myself, or setting boundaries, normal problems that people with a traumatic past have. And in that we can talk and support each other and use tools together. And having a community of people to help you is very powerful. Now, I'm still talking about the problem with conventional treatment, and I just want to say medication. Medication can interfere with the natural inclination that people have to re-regulate when they get dysregulated. Everybody gets dysregulated sometimes. Most people eventually re-regulate. And what we do in my programs is we keep practicing that muscle of learning. Okay, there's my dysregulation symptoms, the cue, the thing I notice, it's happening. And then we use tools, we come back into re-regulation as quickly as possible. So the goal is like to be regulated as much as possible, more, most of the time. Totally changes what happens in your life if you're regulated most of the time. A lot of things that you couldn't previously do, whatever it is for you, be at a party and act like yourself, have a relationship, try for a new job. Everybody has different thresholds of what they can do before they get dysregulated. Well, if you can stay regulated more of the time, the world is your oyster. You can do so many things. Because it's like, oh yeah, I'm kind of, I'm on a date, I'm getting really anxious. You can just go into the bathroom, use your tools, come back out. Nobody's the wiser that you were in there writing and, washing your hands in warm water to get your nervous system back online and grounded again, and go back out there and be yourself again. Like there's this huge flexibility. You could also work with a professional or a therapist, on something if you know how to regulate. And there are therapists who know about that. I think a lot of the tools that people teach for re-regulation, when they're tools that are espoused or created by people who don't have CPTSD, they're not powerful enough. That's all I'm saying, And so I pay particular attention to people who themselves have CPTSD to learn from. Medication, though, it's very imprecise for treating trauma. It has its applications for different mental health situations, but for complex PTSD, there's very low evidence that it helps, like, anti-anxiety drugs and antidepressants. There's a reason why they give those things, but for CPTSD, it just doesn't do that much. We haven't found something that really hits that spot. The problem is that your natural ability to re-regulate and to work on that, I can just tell, like a lot of times when I'm working with coaching clients and they keep using the tools and they keep using the tools and they just can't get back. And I'm like, are you medicated by chance? And sometimes it's like weed or alcohol even. It could be that, but also prescribed drugs and, psychotropic drugs that are given can make it more difficult to re-regulate. Now, some people, they really can't stop taking. And I would not recommend that anybody just kind of make their own decision to get off. It has to be done with a doctor if that's your choice to do. And whether you do or don't take them, you can still use these tools. But if you're having trouble getting that breakthrough and getting back into a state of regulation, which you'll know when you feel it, it has a very pleasant feeling to it of like alert, calm, attentive. But if you can't get there, it could be that medication is interfering, and that's a longer term process. But I'm just saying there's a better way, okay? So the standard therapeutic modes of when you go talk about what happened, talk about your traumatic stories, feel your feelings. If it's more likely to produce dysregulation than healing, we have a problem. Most insurance plans, they'll say, okay, you can go talk to a therapist 10 times. And it's like, you talk about your trauma, you're crying, you're crying, you're crying. And it would appear that you're not getting anywhere. Then they go, well, you better take medication. Now you just may have been cut off from the ability to get back your ability to re-regulate, to start working on that. So I feel that the system is broken. The system is misguided. It's not everybody in the system, but it is like the baseline of the system. And so as you're trying to get help for yourself, I just really encourage you to ask questions, do research, read, be willing to try things, experiment with them, but also listen to yourself. And if it doesn't give you a feeling like you're doing better, there should be a feeling of relief, like very quickly. Don't let anybody tell you, oh, this is going to take a long time. And you're like, I don't know, I'm just really going down. Yes, don't listen to that. It has to feel better. Maybe you can do deeper work that feels terrible to look at when you can stay regulated, but I would prioritize being able to stay regulated. Now, standard professional help cannot be relied upon to be the answer. It's cost prohibitive. It's wildly, not standardized, and it's also unproven. And people don't really talk about this, but studies show that when it comes to how people are diagnosed, there's a lot of variation depending on who the practitioner is. When it comes to how people are treated, there's so much variation that researchers have concluded it's almost meaningless. So what I encourage you to look at is, what are your symptoms? People are always saying, well, I don't know, my childhood wasn't that bad, but I have all the symptoms. Can I come to your channel? Can I take your course? And I'm like, yes, we are about symptoms here. This direct cause and effect, like my mom did this, therefore I have this. It's not true for everybody. Look at your siblings, right? Different kids in the same family have really different outcomes. Everybody's different. If you have these symptoms of dysregulation, then yes, use my techniques. If you're trying to get your life together because self-defeating behavior has gotten the better of you and you need to empower yourself to make a change, yes, these programs are for you. So, okay, next principle. Conventional beliefs about trauma have disempowered survivors. The power to heal exists in present time. I insist, the power to heal is in present time. And the only aspect of trauma that can be controlled is our own symptoms and what we do about them. Now, if you're actively in a situation that's traumatizing you, okay, yes, other people are involved. But this old therapeutic model urges us to give all the power away about that change by focusing on the past, on talking about things and relying on professionals to solve everything. And you know what? You get 1 hour a week with a professional, and really, have you ever felt like that was enough? And I just think professionals are perfect for advising, helping, guiding you between days where you've got your own tools, you're working on your own process. And I do think that that is so important. I get told from time to time, there's thousands of therapists and doctors who refer their clients to Crappy Childhood Fairy and to take my courses, and they come themselves and they get coached. This is for everybody. But there's a few professionals who find it very threatening that what we're doing is self-empowering. We're teaching each other as peers. We're helping each other. We're serving as a community to each other. We're defining what it's like to have CPTSD, and we're helping each other understand what it is. And we're reading all the books that some of them are not reading, frankly. Nobody can read everything. And so we belong at the table talking about this. And we need to be focusing not only on the hurtful actions of others, but we need to be focusing on ourselves and assessing ourselves for the choices that we make that are perpetuating the harm of childhood trauma, both our own symptoms and then the way we treat other people. That saying, hurt people, and usually, people mean different things when they say that, but it's something we have to take very seriously. If we're not healing our trauma, we run the risk of hurting and traumatizing other people, certainly children, but also partners, coworkers, everybody in our path. Healing is so important. It's helping our health. It's helping the way we relate to other people. It's bringing about a sweetness in our lives. It's helping us earn the money we need to adequately support ourselves, which is really important. But because of this focus on the past, what happened, it's left generations of trauma survivors unhealed and locked into this identity as victims. And I understand, as a trauma survivor myself, yes, we are victims, in fact. What happened to us victimized us. Trauma is an injury, not an identity. And so it's just really proliferated in this generation, this identity. It's like, I'm a victim. That's all I am. You have to change so that I cannot be a victim. Well, it just never works. So even if that were fair, which sometimes it is, it's not going to happen. So if you're going to heal, if you're going to be an empowered person who makes a difference in the world in the way that you want to make a difference in the world, it's so important to heal your trauma, to learn to calm your triggers, to reduce the effect of triggers to make you dysregulated, disconnected, and in your self-defeating behavior. So the seventh principle is that healing complex PTSD requires taking your power back. That's your agency. Do you know that word, agency? It's your ability to lead your own life, to make changes, to affect the world. Now, once you own your healing, you no longer have to depend on fallible people and the healthcare system wherever you may live and the methods available to you. They may not be enough for you. You are less inclined when you're empowered like that to settle for stock answers that don't fit. Like the one that I'm always complaining about is how I got told, gosh, you keep making these, destructive choices, my self-defeating behavior. You must want to recreate your childhood. And I just always knew, no, I don't. I want desperately to have a better life, and I don't understand how I keep getting into this rut, and it's, now I know, it's neurological dysregulation. My brain was down, my feelings were up, I was making impulsive choices, and I couldn't understand how I got there. I was having trouble reading the situation. I had an attachment wound that was pushing me into relationships quickly and making it hard to leave because of the abandonment trauma that would come up in there. So, like so many people with trauma, I was stuck with this idea, this isn't helping me. It must be me. It just must be that I'm a defective person. You're not defective. The trauma symptoms I'm describing here are totally normal for people who were abused and neglected in childhood. Now we know. And you are the best judge of what helps you. So it's very important to stay at in the driver's seat of what you're doing in your healing. Confidence in yourself happens, it grows, it develops through courageous experimentation and a focus on identifying and healing the symptoms that you notice in yourself, and then changing your approach to life or the behaviors that are sabotaging you. And you can do this, and it feels great. Your self-esteem just goes vroom when you make these changes and discover that you actually can. But it takes a shift of focus from the traditional way that people are viewing trauma. It's oh, it happened to you. Talk about it, and then one day you'll feel better. That day just never came, not through that avenue. So though other people can support us, there's nobody else who can actually make the healing happen for us. Not therapists, not partners, not parents. So don't even wait for them to apologize. Parents almost never apologize. But even when they do, which is nice, it's not going to change that you now have a neurological injury. If you have CPTSD, the damage is there. It's in here now. And so to repair the relationship when that's possible is a lovely thing, but you still will have your symptoms until you learn to calm them. So that brings me to the eighth principle. And this is that character development is essential to healing. And in particular, character development is important for developing the ability to connect with other people. If you have difficulty with boundaries, if you tend to lash out, these are totally common symptoms, right? But they push people away. And so they harm your ability to connect. I've never met a person who has complex PTSD who didn't struggle in some of these ways to connect with other people. And the thing is, not only do you need some healing to have healthy connections with people, but you need some kind of connection with people to heal. And I always say, I was so sad when I realized this, because I would like to believe that everything in life I can do by myself. But I can't heal trauma by myself. It's a relational wound. And much of it is healed by practicing connecting with other people. So even if your ability to connect with other people is kind of like rickety and has ouchies in it, you just have to keep trying in a titrated way. I have this course called Connection Bootcamp you can take if you want to learn a system, a 30-day program to start practicing that. And then overall, I have a class called Healing Childhood PTSD, which is a great place to start. So most complex PTSD symptoms that we're experiencing today are caused not by the original trauma. And this is, I keep saying this, original trauma did it. We can't change that part. But that original trauma has led to some self-defeating behaviors, and those are causing us to re-traumatize ourselves. Now, it's still not your fault, especially when it's first happening, but I'm here sort of like ruining that innocence in you where you can say, I didn't know, because now you know. Your self-defeating behaviors are reactivating your trauma, are pushing people away. That, the loss of someone you love who rejects you, who breaks up with you or stops being friends with you, or you lose a job, like that's devastating to a person with CPTSD. It's hard for anybody, but that's why it's so important to learn these things and why making a little change here and a little change there, it really starts to build so that you can maintain good relationships all around or, start to improve them. It's a process, right? But you start to improve them, and then those good relationships give you more strength for the next move you're making in your healing. Character development is not taught in most dysfunctional homes. It's barely taught in schools, and most therapist offices don't teach it. I have a friend who was getting a PhD as a therapist, and they learn ethics. And ethics, I said, well, what do you learn? And it was mainly like, don't sleep with your clients. And there was very, very limited, you can't give advice to people and you can't just tell them, hey, stop sleeping with married men. That's what's great. Like Crappy Childhood Fairy, I can say, hey, stop doing it. It's going to make you miserable. It's morally wrong. It's going to make your life unhappy. It's going to gut your ability to have a good relationship. I'll just be in your face. But that's character development, discerning what's right, what's wrong. That's so important to your healing. And that's a lot of what we got robbed of growing up. If your parents were drunk, high, fighting all the time, mentally ill, absent, you didn't get that moral education on like, how do you be a fine, upstanding person? But you're not going to be happy until you are. Like everybody's coded with that desire. And trauma can kind of drive it out of you and make you kind of try to find other ways to get your needs met, but it will never work. You need to be a good person and you need to be yourself. Those are the two ingredients of being really fulfilled and really happy. And being fully yourself includes bringing your gifts to bear in the world. So there's a fear around addressing self-defeating behaviors because people confuse that with blaming the victim. And every time I talk about self-defeating behaviors, someone in the comments will go, you're just blaming the victim. You're just shaming people. But I'm not. Believe me, everybody's walking around feeling the shame anyway of what maybe they did wrong and a whole bunch of other stuff that they didn't do. Now, the 12-step model is one example of the centrality of moral reckoning in healing. The point of healing isn't just to feel better, but to become the person that you can be. And that is all about clearing up the mistakes that you've made, the way you've harmed others. Complex PTSD suppresses and oppresses your true nature. And you risk losing forever the opportunity to express who you are if you don't heal. So on a large scale, complex PTSD robs the entire world of the loving and talented and creative person you are, of the participation of so many people who are right now, repressed under their trauma. They cannot bring it right now. And we are all suffering as a result. When you look out at the world and you're like, something's missing, it should be better than this, we've got to make it a better world. Well, who's missing? Like about 7% of the population who is suppressed under trauma right now. Trauma is part of who we are. It's not going anywhere. It's going to be part of our story forever. But healing the symptoms allows us to simultaneously accept what happened and then to transcend it, to become who we were always meant to be, which now includes your greatness as well as your history, your trauma. So many, many great men and women have had traumatic pasts. Trauma hurt them, but it didn't define them. In fact, it informed them, it deepened them, and it empowered them to have compassion and to be motivated to make a difference in the world. Now, true happiness requires that we develop and use our gifts to bring to the world what we're capable of bringing. And then having done that, to create conditions where everybody has the opportunity to develop their gifts. That is a full and happy and meaningful life, and I hope you'll take it to heart. I've learned a lot about healing past trauma by observing people who are trying to change their lives and watching who moves forward and transforms their personalities and their relationships and their material success in the world, and then watching who does not. And I got to meet a lot of people who are working on themselves because I was in 12-step rooms for decades. And I had periods where I was willing to go to any lengths. I was doing all the work. And then I had these other times where I really didn't do it. I couldn't do it. I didn't have it in me. I would shrink from it. And I would just sort of go along and talk the right talk, but, just do the least amount of work. In my case, it was usually because I was into some relationship that wasn't really compatible with my healing. It was dragging me down, or because I just wanted people to think I had it all together. So I made excuses for the problems I was having, all the conflicts with people, all the financial problems, all the relationship chaos. So if you're not moving forward, I know what that's like. But then I did move forward, and that's what I teach here for anyone who's ready to face the problems honestly and see where they might be resisting what's right, what's in their best interest to make their lives better. So I want to share with you a list of 6 excuses that I hear all the time that I've made myself. And excuses, they're like cement shoes, okay? So if you recognize them, you know there's a big opportunity for you to get free and heal and change your life. You don't want these cement shoes anymore, right? Number 1, the first one is what I call kicking the can down the road. I first need to do X, then I'll do Y. And it's an artificial sequence, right? Often people will put giant projects between where they are now and where they want their life to be. Like, I'll start eating healthy once things stop being so stressful. I'll do it then. It'll get better then. I'll leave this terrible relationship once I get my sanity back. I hear that a lot. That's a really dangerous fallacy. You're actually not going to get more sane in a terrible relationship. You're going to get ground down. So it's going to be much more difficult for you to leave the longer you stay. You'll often see people sabotaging their goals with some foolish action, something that really sets them back. Like, they want to go back to school, but then they go into debt. And then they can't afford to go to school. Or they want to get into a relationship, but then they hook up with some crappy ex and get all emotionally wrecked about it. Or spend 6 months kind of, emotionally latched onto this thing that's not going anywhere. They're not going to get into that great relationship they were hoping for, not in that year. The second one is what I call getting on a high horse, where you're thinking, you know what, I'm not like all those shallow normies. Like, I have to suffer. And you get this with, I'm an artist, or I can't be expected to work full time, or I can't really care for my responsibilities because I'm just so, hurt or so creative. It's a superiority over other things. High horses, nobody likes them, and they don't help you solve your trauma. The third one is the straw man. Do you know what a straw man is? It's like this artificial entity where you can put all the blame and you go, well, I can't change because this situation is completely holding me back. But it's kind of a fake thing, right? Or it's something where you're sort of constructing it as this big obstacle, but the obstacle may not be as big as you think. So this would be something like, the problem is with the system. It's rigged against people like me. It's capitalism. It's patriarchy. It's the diet culture. People are idiots and they have this religion or this political view, and so on. But staying stuck and blaming it entirely on outside entities and people it's an excuse. It's an excuse to not change. And it'd be so great if you could honestly say that change was impossible because of this issue, or that the group of people make it impossible for you, because then all you'd have to do is get them to change and you'd be fine. But that's not how it is. A, they're not going to change. And B, even if they did, you would still have your sort of trauma symptoms. You'd still have the things inside that are limiting you. So you might not ever be rich. You might not ever have a career of your dreams. But I guarantee you, if you can face and work on what is holding you back in here and in here, you can change. People can make positive transformations under all kinds of circumstances. They do that when they're poor. They do it when they're incarcerated. They do it when they have to live in hiding. Yes, there are huge obstacles and disadvantages, and life is not fair. But every person, including you, is capable of great things based on where you are right now. For each of us, the job is finding how, in the environment in which we find ourselves, with the strengths and the weaknesses that we have, with the cards we've been dealt, what can we strive for? Can we move forward? Because we can blossom despite everything. All right, the fourth one I call collapsing. I give up. I can't do things like this job or this conversation or this obligation or this relationship where I promised someone I'd help them, but now I'm tired. Tiredness is a huge form of collapse. And as you know, tiredness has a lot to do with choices that you make. And yes, I know some people have health conditions, chronic fatigue or cancer or long COVID, or even worse things. And that's another story, right? That's not what I'm talking about. Even when you have illnesses like that, it still requires taking care of yourself and maximizing your energy to the best of your ability. So there's no scenario where people with CPTSD really can get away with trashing their bodies and sacrificing their energy and their motivation. It hits us harder than people who didn't have huge trauma. We can prevent a lot of the health risks that are correlated with trauma, but it means really, really taking care of ourselves. Sleep, healthy food, and exercise. Those are the basic building blocks. If you're doing those things, you don't have to be perfect, but if you can do them at 80%, wow, then you can get to work on the emotional reasons that you sometimes collapse. When you have that together, you can start to look at the outside reasons you sometimes collapse. But it's got to start in here. People who are quite ground down inside are not in a good position to change the world or change other people or make things better. It starts here. So maybe you were trying to put yourself out there and it brought up a lot of fear. Or maybe you're really vulnerable to criticism and you don't have the kind of friends who help you keep criticism in perspective. You know, it's cool. It's just one person. It's okay. I get that. Maybe you let problems pile up and it's too hard to face the mountain of problems. But there's a way forward, and it's not through escaping into substances or the internet or anger or isolation. It's a day-by-day process of showing up, doing the good things that keep you feeling okay, doing the work to keep a community of supportive people around you. I know it's easier said than done, but it's doable. And using the tools that help you do all that one day at a time. 12-step groups. You can use my daily practice. It's a free set of techniques. Saved my life. I teach it to everybody. It's a free course. It's down in the description section under every video I make. It's on the free tools page of my website. Please go find it. Check it out. You can come to free calls with me once you've signed up. We do the techniques together. I answer questions. It's a great way we can meet each other. You can also join my membership if you want. But if you're trying to change these behaviors where you're making excuses for changing your life, these are the areas where you might be getting bogged down. Okay, the next one is magical thinking. This is where you decide to believe that some bad situation you've created in your life, it's just happening to you. Bad things do just happen sometimes, but I'm talking about the things you actually chose, which becomes especially clear if the same bad thing happens again and again. Have you been there? I have. The abusive work environment, the emotionally avoidant partner, for example. Your trauma may be driving you to these patterns, but the pattern isn't going to change until you change it. So try to notice if you're making excuses for your patterns. What you hear people saying is, I'm just unlucky, or I'm cursed. I used to say that. I really thought it too. I'm like, I'm cursed. You know, everything I touch just turns to crap. I saw later it was me. Or you believe that the problem is that you attract people who hurt you, you know, narcissists, manipulative people. The problem isn't actually who is attracted to you. It's who you are attracted to. It's who you let into your life, who you get into a relationship with. When you can't detect who somebody is, or you get in so fast that you don't realize till too late what they're like, that was you. That was you, okay? And you take your power back when you admit, I keep being attracted to narcissists versus they just find me. I don't know why. All right, the next one is what I call fatalism. Fatalism is when you believe that something has to be that way. It's inevitable. And in traumatized people, it shows up as, my parents abandoned me, so I always end up with people who abandon me. And yes, it's absolutely true that the pattern of childhood tends to show up as your pattern in adult relationships tends to, but you can change that. It's not inevitable. It's actually, when you have perspective on it and you've been working on it, you can see every time where you ignored the red flag and you walked right in anyway. There's this little moment where you can change how you do that. You actually have the power to do that. So watch out when you explain your problems this way, as if there's a direct cause and effect that you play no role in. My parents made me like this. I'm like this. I'm a highly sensitive person. I'm an empath. And even calling yourself an adult child of an alcoholic, all of that, the labeling of yourself, it's just a way of sort of giving up on all your potential to be different, to be not so affected by what happened to you as you are right now. You have that potential. You're a fully feeling, fully capable human being. You're working to heal the effects of the past and become yourself. What happened to you is not your identity. When you keep focusing on that identity, those abusive events or the neglect, it's a distraction. Believing that is distracting you. It's a coping mechanism that's making it so you don't have to focus on the problems right in front of you. The way you might be isolating and avoiding your own life. The way you might not be taking responsibility, or you're pushing people away with emotions you haven't yet learned to regulate. Or you're living as if somebody is somehow coming to save you. That's really common. You need to save you. I know it's sad, but it's true. You need to save you. And you can do that by facing the problems and looking for the parts of those problems where your own trauma-driven thinking or dysfunctional choices have played a part. You can focus on those, not because you're bad, but because this is the only part of life where you really do have power in yourself in present time. Okay, the last big excuse, it's really a whole category of excuses, and it's what's known as spiritual bypass. And the people who do this are sometimes religious, they're sometimes spiritual, sometimes they're against religion and spirituality, or their ideology is a religion. It could be like a political belief, but they get so locked in that they cannot see reality. And this is stuff like, I'm exactly where I need to be right now. It's all good. Or if it's meant to be, it'll happen. Or God doesn't give you more than you can handle. I particularly hate that one because I've lost people to suicide, so it's just patently true. Well, I don't think God gives you those circumstances, but people frequently end up with things they can't handle. That happens. So I consider that a spiritual bypass. A lot of spiritual bypass, what it really is encouraging words that are meant to lift you up and keep you going when things are tough, but they can be used to pretend that you have no agency. They can be used to just make an excuse, I just can't do anything about this. Any belief system can be used by you or people who want to exploit you to put up with crap. So doctors who tell you your trauma symptoms are all imagined, that's a belief system of theirs. Therapists who tell you that the fact you're still miserable after 2 years is because you just need to feel your feelings or grieve or whatever, and you're like, I don't know, I've been crying every day for years. That's a spiritual bypass. That's not dealing with the reality of the situation. You need and deserve to feel happier, to feel more ease and comfort right now. So don't BS around with other people's excuses and don't make your own. Healing is possible when you can recognize your own symptoms and then work on ways to soften them. When you can recognize your own self-defeating behaviors and work on ways to change them. You don't have to do it all at once. Sometimes you just pick the one that's causing the most problems for you and start there. A lot of what you've been told about how to heal and what works for changing your life just isn't true. Too many people get stuck in their trauma because they think something outside of themselves, society, parents, ex-partners, events that happened in the past, that those are the sole cause of problems today. And the truth is, you've got to hope that's not true because there's very rarely anything you can do about the past or about the way other people have behaved. So if you're waiting for those things to change and outrage is building and you're falling into despair, I have great news. Your healing doesn't come from those things. It comes from things you can change. And if there's anything you're destined to change about society, or if a confrontation with the people who hurt you is in the cards, then you, healed, is how that power within you is going to get strong enough that you can take those problems on. But you, in the middle of your trauma reactions, I'm going to be honest with you, Active CPTSD is such a vulnerable state. There's distorted perception undermining you. There's emotional dysregulation undermining you. There's almost always a lack of reliable emotional support from people around you. That's part of why you have CPTSD. But it's also a symptom of CPTSD. It drives away people you can trust. So my trauma healing began with a huge paradigm shift. The old broken way that I saw the nature of the problem and the nature of the solution totally shattered in a period of a few weeks. And a series of traumatic events threw me into a deep trauma reaction. And me doing everything you're supposed to do about trauma threw me even deeper into a trauma reaction. I don't blame anyone, but I was trying to operate and navigate solutions from a set of beliefs that weren't true. And when your beliefs are true, how you know is they work. When nothing is working, it just might be pointing to, there's no nicer way to say this. It might be pointing to lies. There are lies in your belief system. Things that lots of people believe, but that aren't true. So things that you might even have been told to believe by experts, or you were bullied into conforming your beliefs to what you were supposed to believe. That might be what's operating when things aren't working for you. But if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So I had a belief system meltdown like that. By luck, when I was at the lowest point in my life, an acquaintance who saw I was going down showed me a way to soften the hold of my old beliefs and to let in some sunshine, some truth. And I woke up. And about half my trauma healing happened in a day, just like that. And it was such a marked and sudden change that the therapist I used to see at the time was sure something was seriously wrong with me. I was serene. I felt okay about things. I felt confident and excited about the possibilities in my life. That was really out of character for me back then. And here I am almost 29 years later to say there very clearly was something right about me at last. And I broke out of the lies that governed my life, and I'll tell you what I did instead. So people say I'm tough love, but I'm telling you nothing changed in my life until I learned and accepted these 10 truths. 1, when it comes to your past trauma, no one is coming to save you from the effects. You'll have to seek that out. So don't just suffer through your life saving up your problems for weekly appointments with someone who's supposed to know what to do. Even if you have access to a therapist, and even if they know how to help you and you actually feel better, you are going to still need tools and awareness that you are in charge of it. It's you who will be recognizing your trauma reactions and devising how you'll change the pattern, and then working every day to fine-tune and integrate those changes. You are sovereign over your healing. Second truth, therapy isn't the only way to heal from trauma. And for some people with CPTSD from childhood, talking about trauma only makes it worse. Our culture says that talk therapy is the way to deal with this kind of problem, but many people's experience feeling like it does more harm than good is backed up by recent research. There's a time and a place to tell your story and get validation and have that blessed experience of understanding what happened. But if talk therapy feels bad and doesn't seem to go anywhere, or if you're like the millions of people who can't afford talk therapy, I want you to know there are simple tools you can learn and use that just might make all the difference. They did for me, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But having a therapist isn't the only way that you can have emotional support. Things like 12-step groups offer support every day of the week with people who are likely to understand what you're going through and have experience. They do have walking the path all the way to healing. This can be a huge benefit whether or not you have professional help, because peers who have healed and whose help you ask for can help you by teaching you the practical day-to-day tips that they develop through real-life experience. And they can help you get the focus off other people who may have hurt you and get the focus back onto your own self-destructive behaviors. Some might call this calling you out. And maybe you see this as the opposite of support. But sometimes the most loving, supportive thing someone can do is be straight with you. And this is something not all therapists can or will do for you. It can be a bit of a taboo for them to give direct advice or make moral judgments about what you're doing, what you plan to do. But getting called out by a 12-step sponsor after years of getting unconditionally supported by a therapist, it was exactly what helped me to stop my trauma-driven behaviors and move forward in my healing very quickly. So you might see in your own experience that you've needed both, and that may be true. But for someone traumatized as a kid, when you're an adult, so much of the problem in present time is the way that you might be re-traumatizing yourself. So that leads me to a third truth that has to be faced, which is that focusing on other people and society and the past drain your power. It's a helpless place because you're helpless to change the past and you can't change other people. Present time is where all your power to heal your own life resides. So healing the thinking, healing the reactions, healing the behaviors that traumatize and re-traumatize you, and in many cases that harm other people. Yes, people hurt you, and yes, there is value in telling your story and getting help to make sense of it. But now what? For many people, it helps them to know they're not alone and there's a reason for their struggles. Healing the thinking, healing the reactions, healing the behaviors that traumatize and re-traumatize you, and in many cases harm other people. Yes, people hurt you, and yes, there is value in telling your story and getting help to make sense of it. For many people, it helps them to know they're not alone, and there's a reason for their struggles. But all that trauma wreaks havoc in your life, and all the understanding in the world isn't enough to straighten out your trauma-driven reactions and your self-destructive behaviors, right? It's now, and not in the past, and it's with yourself, not with the people who abused and neglected you. That's what holds the potential for changing your life. It's you now. And once you make this shift, you can start to recognize your symptoms when they're happening and taking actions to create a trauma-free life. That's what works. Okay, fourth truth. Neurological dysregulation is the symptom underneath the vast majority of other trauma symptoms. You probably never got taught this, and you probably never got help with it. And this could explain why you've tried so many things that never worked. The truth is, until you learn to re-regulate, your healing efforts are likely to just kind of limp along. When you learn to spot dysregulation and quickly re-regulate, everything gets easier. All right, fifth truth. Research doesn't show a clear pattern of efficacy when medication is prescribed for CPTSD symptoms. Not only don't they help, but they can actually make it harder for you to re-regulate. Antidepressants and anti-anxiety drugs might be necessary for you for other reasons, at least in your experience or in your doctor's opinion. But because our insurance system tends to push people suffering with trauma symptoms first to talk therapy, usually limited to 10 sessions, then when that doesn't work, refer them to prescriptions, a lot of people are getting dysregulated by the talking approach and then thwarted in their efforts to re-regulate because they're taking medication. So this is something you'll need to talk to your doctor about. It's a bad idea to change medication without medical supervision. But in my experience, staying sensitive to the feeling of dysregulation and then mastering re-regulation is super important, maybe the most important thing that you can do to heal trauma symptoms. So if medication you're taking or any mind-altering substance is blocking you, that's going to defeat the purpose of learning to re-regulate and healing your trauma. Number 6, let's talk about the phrase self-medicating. This is a euphemism for the use of drugs and alcohol by people with emotional pain. Now, not everybody gets emotional relief from drugs and alcohol, but those who do don't usually get that beneficial effect for very long. So a word for trying to feel better might be self-anesthetizing or maybe self-sedation. Because medicine, self-medicating, medicine implies it heals you. And sedated people are seldom able to make the positive changes needed to actually heal their trauma. You know, it is part neurological, and then it's a lot of changes in your life. And that takes being present. When you numb your pain, I get it. It's what you need to do sometimes, but it's delaying the part where you feel the pain and pain has information in it that you need to know. You know, what's going wrong? Where does this suddenly go south for me? What's my trauma reaction? Versus what's a feeling that I actually need to act on? What is triggering dysregulation for that matter? And what is the moment before that happens when I can maybe learn to put a little pause in and re-regulate before deciding what to say or how I'm going to respond to something? So if alcohol and drugs are part of how you're coping, there's a reason that your healing has been so hard. And there's an easier way when you're ready for it. All right, seventh truth. There's no point in arguing with people that they haven't met your needs. You are the one who meets your needs. When you do a good job of that, you're better able to choose caring people and to have in your life, people who you're going to have as friends or as a partner. And then it's not going to be such a question of whether your needs are met. You meet your needs, and then from there, you can attract those caring people. Operating on the belief that other people are supposed to do that, meet your needs, just because you've become attached to them, it's an echo from childhood when your needs were supposed to be met by someone, but they weren't. In adulthood, caring and commitment happen rarely and they build slowly. So being angry at someone you've been dating a short time for not meeting your needs, as one of our members said recently, it's like driving around wildly, expecting the other cars to keep you safe and then being mad that you crashed. So meeting your own needs is the strongest protection that you have also against romantic obsession. That is something that rises up when your needs aren't met, and it starts with you. All right, the eighth truth. When you've ended up in bad relationships, the truth is most times the red flags were there on day one, but maybe you rushed in anyway. What caused that? An attachment wound, extreme loneliness that made it unthinkable to turn back no matter how glaring the problem was that you saw. Until you can heal that need to go forward anyway, the pain is going to keep happening. And this is normal for people neglected in childhood. Healing happens when you can slow down and stay connected and honest with people who are supportive of your healing process. Then you can develop the awareness and the guardrails that you need to stop making the same relationship decisions that have worn you down in your life so far. All right, the ninth truth is about how you slow things down. And though a lot of people don't want to hear this, the way to do that is by avoiding casual sex. To borrow from the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, which I read a long time ago, I'm going to change a little phrase here and say that casual sex is the dubious luxury of untraumatized people. Now, maybe it's fine for them, but for people with attachment wounds, it opens the door to trauma-driven thinking and behaviors that can ruin the relationship, and it can wreck your happiness. It can be very destabilizing. Traumatized people can have good relationships, but there's a lot of learning that you maybe didn't get from your family, and you can make space to learn a better way by going slowly. All right, number 10, as painful as it is to realize that a lot of your trauma now is from you making trauma-driven choices, facing the truth is nothing to fear. It feels good to seek the truth of your situation, to see your part in it, and no matter how small, to heal that. Facing reality, it feels good. It's empowering. It brings peace. And sometimes you'll cry, but good cleansing tears bring relief. And if you need help with this process, that's what we do at Crappy Childhood Fairy. Truth feels good, and you need to feel good. You do. You need it. Not years from now, but today. So if you need help for that, check out the links in the description section below.